It was a typical Wednesday afternoon when the news hit. Elon Musk, billionaire entrepreneur, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, the mind behind the revolution of electric cars and space exploration, was facing an unexpected challenge. And no, it wasn't from another Fortune 500 CEO or a rival tech giant. The challenge came from an unlikely source, a 12-year-old kid. Elon Musk versus the human calculator. Who will come out on top? The headline blared across the internet. Elon sat at his desk in the SpaceX headquarters, staring at his phone. The tweet, simple but bold, was from a young boy named Alex Rivera, a prodigy known across the globe for his extraordinary mental math abilities. The tweet read, "Hey at Elon Musk, I'll bet you can't solve this faster than I can. Let's have a math off. Your move. Hashtag human calculator challenge." Elon raised an eyebrow. It wasn't the first time someone had challenged him, but this was different. It was a kid. A kid who claimed to be faster than a supercomputer when it came to math. The tweet had gone viral within minutes. In an age where anything could become a viral sensation, this challenge was taking the world by storm. People from all corners of the globe began speculating. Could this kid really be that good? Could a young boy's talent rival the sharp mind of one of the most brilliant tech entrepreneurs of the century? But why did this matter? Elon Musk wasn't just a businessman. He was a visionary. From revolutionizing electric cars with Tesla to reshaping space exploration with SpaceX, Elon's mind was always thinking of the next big thing. He had built rockets that could land themselves, developed electric cars that could drive across the country, and even dabbled with AI and neural tech. Yet, this tweet, this innocent challenge from a kid who could calculate faster than a calculator, had shaken something deep inside him. What did it mean for a man like Elon Musk, who prided himself on having the ability to solve problems that stretched the boundaries of space and time, to be beaten by someone with no formal education? Was this just a publicity stunt? Or was there more to this young challenger than met the eye? Elon tapped the screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Was it worth it? Was it worth engaging with a kid who might just be another internet sensation with a short-lived claim to fame? He took a deep breath. He had faced much bigger challenges, launching rockets into space, colonizing Mars, and disrupting industries. But this was different. The world was watching. And for the first time, Elon wasn't sure how this was going to play out. A notification popped up. It was a video from Alex himself. In the video, Alex stood in a small, cluttered room, the background filled with books and various math puzzles. His voice was calm, confident. "Hey Elon, I'm Alex. I'm 12 years old, and I'm challenging you to a math off. No calculators, no shortcuts, just pure mental math. Let's see who's really the fastest brain in the world." A flash of numbers appeared on the screen as Alex quickly solved a complex algebraic equation. The numbers flickered across the screen so fast that they were almost impossible to follow. He ended the video with a smile. "So, what do you say? I'll be waiting for your response. Hashtag human calculator challenge." Elon couldn't help but chuckle. The kid was good, really good, maybe too good. There was something about Alex's confidence that piqued his interest. "All right," Elon muttered to himself. "Game on." He hit reply and typed, "Challenge accepted. Let's do this. We'll make it interesting. How about a live-streamed math-off? The world's watching." He clicked send, and just like that, the stage was set. What do you think, dear reader? Would you take up the challenge? Let us know in the comments below. Would you put your skills to the test against someone like Elon Musk? Or would you rather cheer from the sidelines? Elon Musk leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen as the confirmation for the math-off appeared in his inbox. The excitement was palpable, not just for the contest itself, but for what it symbolized. He hadn't expected a kid to catch his attention like this, but something about Alex Rivera intrigued him. Elon's life, as everyone knew, had been anything but ordinary. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, he was the son of a Canadian mother and a South African father, both of whom were accomplished in their own fields. His childhood was filled with books, science fiction, and dreams that seemed to stretch far beyond the boundaries of his small world. But his early years weren't easy. He was bullied at school for being a bookish, awkward kid who was constantly lost in his own thoughts. Yet, Elon's mind was always active, always thinking, always dreaming of the impossible. He devoured books about technology, physics, and space. By the time he was a teenager, he was already tinkering with computers and software, and his love for technology took root. At 17, Elon moved to Canada to attend Queen's University and later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. His path to Silicon Valley was paved with failures and moments of doubt, but those setbacks only fueled his drive. From Zip2 to PayPal, from Tesla to SpaceX, Elon's career was a never-ending journey of solving problems that most people thought were unsolvable. But as successful as Elon was, he often felt a gnawing emptiness. There was always something more to achieve, some new frontier to explore. Perhaps that's why he didn't hesitate when the challenge from Alex came. It wasn't just about proving who was smarter or faster. It was about pushing the boundaries, testing the limits of what was possible, even if that meant going toe-to-toe with a 12-year-old. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Alex Rivera was preparing for his own moment in the spotlight. Alex grew up in a modest home in a small town in the Midwest. His parents were teachers, instilling in him a love for learning and discovery. From a young age, it was clear that Alex's mind worked differently. While most kids his age were playing video games or kicking soccer balls, Alex was solving complex math problems for fun. It all started when he was just 5 years old. His father had shown him a multiplication table as a way to entertain him on a rainy afternoon, and from that moment, Alex's obsession with numbers began. What began as a simple hobby quickly evolved into something much more extraordinary. By the time Alex was 8, he could solve quadratic equations in his head faster than some adults could on a calculator. He could multiply 6-digit numbers in seconds, calculate square roots in his head, and perform complex algebraic manipulations without breaking a sweat. His teachers were astounded. His peers, not so much. At school, Alex was known as the weird genius, the kid who always had his nose buried in a book. He was a solitary figure, someone who didn't quite fit in with the other children. But that didn't bother him. Alex didn't care about being popular. What fascinated him was the world of numbers, the patterns, the logic, the beauty behind each equation. He knew that his abilities were rare, and that someday they could change the world. But Alex wasn't just a human calculator. He had a deep sense of empathy and a desire to help others. He volunteered at local charities, tutored underprivileged kids in math, and even helped his peers understand complicated topics. Yet, despite all this, he remained under the radar, never seeking the limelight. That is, until the day he posted that tweet to Elon Musk. The decision to challenge Musk wasn't just a whim. Alex had spent hours watching interviews and reading books about Elon's vision for the future, how he wanted to make life multiplanetary, how he sought to solve the world's energy problems, and how he was constantly challenging the status quo. Alex admired Elon, not just as a tech mogul, but as a pioneer. But what if, just what if, there was something Elon couldn't do? What if a kid like him, who was practically a walking calculator, could challenge even the brightest minds in the world? Alex had always dreamed of making a difference, and the time seemed right to step into the spotlight. Maybe this is my moment, Alex thought, sitting in his room late that night, staring at the screen where Elon had accepted his challenge. The clock was ticking down. The math-off was set to begin in just a few days, and Alex felt a mix of excitement and anxiety building up inside him. He wasn't just competing against Elon Musk. He was competing against the world's expectations. How would you feel if you were Alex? Would you be excited, nervous, or overwhelmed by the pressure? Let us know your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for updates. This challenge is just getting started. The day of the math-off had finally arrived, and the anticipation was overwhelming. The world had been waiting for this moment. The battle of the century, the clash between two minds. One a tech billionaire who had redefined the boundaries of possibility, and the other a 12-year-old boy with the ability to solve mathematical problems faster than a supercomputer. Elon Musk sat in a private, high-tech conference room at SpaceX headquarters. The room was minimalist, just a table, a few chairs, and the giant screens that would broadcast the event to millions of viewers across the globe. The setup was straightforward. A live stream on multiple platforms, from YouTube to Twitter, with interactive features that allowed viewers to suggest questions and challenges in real time. Musk had been in countless high-stakes situations, but today felt different. His heart raced a little faster as he adjusted his SpaceX-branded jacket. His team had set up a system for him to compete, but he wasn't sure how his brain would react to something like this. A math-off against a kid? It seemed almost surreal. "Sir, everything's set up. We're ready for the stream," his assistant said, standing by the door. "Thanks, Sarah. Let's make this interesting," Elon replied, forcing a smile. But inside, he wasn't as confident as he usually was. The challenge wasn't just about the math, it was about his reputation. If he lost to a 12-year-old, how would that affect his legacy? He prided himself on innovation, on seeing the world in ways others couldn't, but was this the one area where he might fall short? Meanwhile, Alex Rivera was sitting in front of a small camera in his room, adjusting his glasses and trying to calm his nerves. The walls around him were lined with math books, equations scribbled on notebooks, and posters of his idols, famous mathematicians and physicists like Albert Einstein and Carl Sagan. He had spent hours preparing for this moment, running through complex equations in his head and practicing lightning-fast calculations. But now, as the countdown on his phone clocked down to 0, he felt a knot in his stomach. He wasn't scared. He was more excited than anything. This was his chance to prove that talent didn't always come from the places people expected. He had been underestimated for years, dismissed as the weird genius by his classmates. But now he had the attention of the world. The kid who was always sitting alone with a book was about to face off against one of the greatest minds of his generation. "All right, Alex. You've got this," he whispered to himself, taking a deep breath. The camera began to roll. "Hi, everyone. It's Alex Rivera here, and I'm excited to take on Elon Musk in this epic math-off." His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding in his chest. "Just so you know, no calculators, no computers. This is pure mental math. Let's see if Elon can keep up." He gave a quick smile before turning toward the screen to see Elon, who was now live-streaming from his SpaceX base, his face calm but the usual mischievous gleam in his eyes unmistakable. As the event began, both contestants were introduced to the virtual audience. The excitement in the air was almost tangible, with comments flooding in from all over the world. "Who do you think will win? Elon Musk or the human calculator?" One comment read. "Alex is just a kid. There's no way he can beat Elon," said another. "This is going to be crazy," someone else added. The rules were simple. Elon and Alex would be presented with a series of increasingly difficult math problems, ranging from basic arithmetic to advanced calculus and number theory. The twist? They had to solve them without writing anything down, no calculators or any other tools allowed. Only their brains. The first few rounds were a warm-up. Simple addition and multiplication problems flashed on the screen. Both Elon and Alex breezed through the questions, solving them in seconds. Elon's face remained confident, but Alex's eyes were focused, his every muscle tense with concentration. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, but he refused to let it shake him. "All right, next problem," Elon said with a grin. He wasn't showing it, but the speed with which Alex answered was beginning to make him feel a little unsettled. The kid wasn't just fast, he was precise. The next round began. The problem appeared on the screen. Solve 987,654,321 x 123,456,789. Elon glanced at it, his mind immediately working to break down the numbers into manageable parts, calculating the result in his head. He had solved big problems, engineering designs, space mission trajectories, and multi-billion-dollar financial models. But this was different. This was speed and precision under pressure. Alex didn't hesitate. His fingers lightly tapped the table as his eyes flickered with calculation. Without blinking, he shot back the answer. 121,932,631,112,635,269. The stream went silent for a moment before the comments exploded. "No way. Did he just do that in under 5 seconds? That's insane. I couldn't even do that on a calculator. Elon, you're in trouble." Elon's face faltered for a split second, but only for a moment. He laughed it off, not letting the growing unease show. "Nice one, Alex," Elon said, trying to keep his cool. "But let's see how you handle something more complex. Are you ready for the next one?" The next problem appeared, even more challenging than the last, and Elon took a deep breath. He had to push harder. He couldn't let this kid win, not after everything he had built. But Alex? Alex was just getting warmed up. The tension in the air was palpable as the rounds progressed. With each passing question, Alex was proving more and more that he was no ordinary kid. He wasn't just fast. His answers were elegant, efficient, and astonishingly accurate. Elon Musk, who had built empires and sent rockets into space, now found himself questioning his own abilities. The equations were becoming harder, and while Elon's mind worked in intricate patterns of engineering and physics, the sheer speed and mental agility of Alex's calculations left him in awe. This wasn't just a math-off anymore. This was becoming a test of Elon's pride. Would he be able to keep up with the human calculator? As the next round began, both contestants were in for a surprise, a twist neither of them had expected. How do you think Elon will handle the next round? Will he regain his confidence, or will Alex continue to dominate? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And stay tuned, because the math-off is just getting started. The crowd's virtual applause was deafening. It wasn't just the speed or the accuracy with which Alex had solved the last problem. It was the sheer confidence he exuded, something that took many years for Elon to build. As the next question appeared on the screen, Elon's mind began to race. The familiar knot in his stomach tightened, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of doubt. "All right, next challenge," Elon said, trying to mask the growing tension behind his voice. The problem on the screen was far from easy. It was a high-level calculus problem, something that involved differential equations and logarithmic functions. Elon was used to these kinds of problems. After all, he'd studied physics at university. But solving them in his head, under the pressure of a live-streamed competition against a kid who seemed to be getting faster with every second, that was something new. He mentally prepared himself. The numbers and symbols danced in his mind as he tried to break the problem down. But before he could even begin formulating his answer, Alex spoke up. Elon, I think there's a problem with the equation," Alex said, his voice calm but firm. Elon paused, looking at the screen in surprise. What was this kid talking about? The live stream chat exploded with comments like, "Did Alex just catch something Elon missed? Is he serious? Did Elon mess up? No way. This is getting intense." Alex continued, pointing to a specific part of the equation on the screen. "Look here. The problem is supposed to involve exponential growth, but the numbers are off. The equation's wrong." Elon's brow furrowed. This was a twist he hadn't seen coming. "What do you mean it's wrong?" Elon asked, his voice cool, but the tension in his body was undeniable. "It's not solvable the way it's written," Alex explained. "If you integrate it the way you've started, you're going to get a result that doesn't make sense mathematically. You've got to adjust the parameters before you start solving." Elon stared at the screen. He blinked. For a moment, it felt like the room had gone silent. Was this kid really schooling him on his own game? He quickly ran the numbers in his mind, double-checking the work he'd done. Alex was right. The equation, as it was written, didn't work out. "All right," Elon said, a hint of admiration creeping into his voice. "You've got a sharp eye, kid. I'll give you that." A few beats of silence passed before he added, "But I'm still going to finish it. Let's keep going." Alex smiled, his confidence unwavering. "Of course, Elon. Let's see what you've got." Elon quickly recalibrated, working through the equation once more. This time, he adjusted the numbers, rechecking every step of the process before finalizing his answer. It wasn't easy, but Elon Musk was not one to back down from a challenge. His solution took a few seconds longer than it would have if he'd been in his own element, free of distractions, but he finally hit the correct answer. The live stream audience, holding their collective breath, waited for the results. Final answer, 5.34. Elon said, exhaling deeply. The screen flashed green, confirming Elon's solution as correct. But the comments in the live stream were mixed. Elon fixed it, but did Alex actually catch him? Is this all just for show, or was Alex really right about the mistake? "I think Alex might be winning this thing." Alex sat back in his chair, watching Elon finish the problem. He wasn't surprised that Elon had fixed the mistake. After all, the man was brilliant. But for Alex, the thrill wasn't in the equations themselves. It was in the mental chess game they were playing. He knew that solving these problems would always come with pressure, but watching Elon work through that pressure had been the most rewarding part of the challenge so far. The two had already gone through several rounds, each one more difficult than the last. But it was clear that this wasn't just about math. It was about something deeper, the respect and admiration each had for the other's intellect. Even though they were competitors, they shared a common drive to understand the world in a way most people couldn't. The next round appeared on the screen. Solve the Riemann hypothesis. The audience gasped. Alex's jaw dropped. Wait, what? The Riemann hypothesis? That's one of the biggest unsolved problems in mathematics. Elon's expression turned serious. This was no longer a friendly competition. This was a high-stakes challenge, a question that had stumped the greatest minds for centuries. The Riemann hypothesis was about the distribution of prime numbers and had been an unsolved problem since it was proposed by mathematician Bernhard Riemann in 1859. A correct solution to the problem would earn anyone who proved it a prize of $1 million, not to mention eternal glory in the world of mathematics. The challenge seemed almost impossible. Was Alex ready for this? Was Elon? I don't expect either of us to solve this, Elon said, speaking directly to Alex through the camera, his tone far more serious now. But let's give it a shot. We've got nothing to lose. Alex, still in disbelief that they were attempting this problem, nodded. You're right. We don't know the solution, but we can try to come at it from different angles. Elon leaned forward, fingers lightly tapping the table as he stared at the numbers on the screen. It was a monumental task, even for someone as brilliant as him. But now, with the weight of the challenge on both of their shoulders, Elon felt a strange sense of camaraderie with Alex. They were both chasing after the impossible. The clock began ticking down as both contestants went silent, their minds racing through calculations and theories. The audience was on the edge of their seats. For the next few minutes, the two contestants appeared to be in a state of intense concentration, their faces serious as they mentally grappled with the most elusive and difficult problem in mathematics. Their responses, however, weren't answers. They were hypotheses, possible angles, and ideas. They were exploring, experimenting, pushing their limits. Then the clock stopped. Both Alex and Elon sat back in their chairs, their faces etched with concentration. The question was over. The comments flooded in. Did either of them solve it? Who do you think is closer to cracking it? Elon or Alex? This is insane. These guys are redefining what's possible. Will Alex and Elon's exploration into the Riemann hypothesis lead to a breakthrough? Or will the challenge take an unexpected turn, leaving them both with more questions than answers? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. This is only the beginning of the math-off, and the stakes are higher than ever. The virtual audience was buzzing with excitement, their comments flooding the chat faster than anyone could read them. People were still trying to wrap their heads around the fact that Elon Musk and Alex Rivera had just tackled one of the most notorious unsolved problems in mathematics, the Riemann hypothesis. While neither had solved it, at least, not publicly, the implications of their effort were profound. It was clear that both of them had pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But amidst the intellectual whirlwind, a deeper emotion was beginning to bubble to the surface, something Elon Musk hadn't anticipated. Respect. For years, Elon had been the one who inspired others, the one who was always ahead of the curve, solving problems that most couldn't even imagine. But today, here he was, face to face with a kid who could not only match him but had even caught a mistake Elon himself hadn't noticed. A kid who, despite his youth, held an astonishing depth of knowledge and talent. Elon sat back in his chair, letting the silence hang in the air. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure what came next. Alex wasn't just a prodigy, he was a phenomenon. A reminder that brilliance wasn't confined to age or experience. Across the screen, Alex's expression was the picture of concentration. He'd known from the start that this competition would be difficult, but he hadn't expected to learn so much. He'd been in awe of Elon Musk for as long as he could remember, admiring the way Elon had revolutionized multiple industries, from electric cars to space travel. But today, In this math-off, something had shifted for Alex. He realized that Elon wasn't just a genius. He was a human being with doubts, struggles, and moments of uncertainty. And that made Alex feel like he wasn't so different from him after all. "All right," Elon said, breaking the silence. That was intense. His voice was steady, but there was a subtle crack in it that revealed just how much the competition had affected him. Alex smiled. "You're telling me. I never imagined we'd be tackling the Riemann hypothesis, even if it was just a glimpse." "I think what we've learned today is that there's always more to learn," Elon said, his voice softening. "You've got a remarkable mind, Alex." "I don't say that lightly." Alex's face flushed, a mix of pride and disbelief. He hadn't expected that kind of acknowledgement, especially from someone like Elon Musk. "Thanks, Elon. I've been following your work for years. It's incredible to see what you've done with Tesla and SpaceX. I hope to do something similar someday." Elon chuckled, leaning forward in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him. "You will. If you keep pushing yourself like this, there's no telling what you'll achieve. And don't let anyone tell you that you're too young to make a difference. That's what people told me when I started out, and look where we are now." For a moment, the atmosphere between them shifted. It was no longer a competition. It was a conversation between two minds who understood the value of pushing the boundaries, of taking on the impossible. But the math-off wasn't over. Not yet. A new round began. The problem this time was a series of Fibonacci sequences, but with a twist. The question wasn't just to find the next number. It was to predict the behavior of the sequence as it extended into infinity. Alex didn't flinch. He was ready. He had spent hours studying advanced mathematical theories, diving into number theory and sequences. He didn't just want to solve the problem. He wanted to understand it, to get to the heart of what made it work. Elon, on the other hand, wasn't taking this lightly. He had been thinking about Alex's mind for the past few minutes, thinking about how he could never quite catch up with that speed and clarity of thought. He had solved problems of immense complexity before, but this was different. This wasn't about rockets or electric cars or even AI. This was raw, pure math. The timer started, and the two contestants dove in. For Alex, this round was like breathing. The sequence unfurled in his mind, and he began to predict the next number, the next step in the chain. He scribbled the result on a piece of paper, just to double-check, even though he didn't need to. Elon, meanwhile, approached the problem from a different angle. His mind worked in formulas and patterns, breaking down the numbers into variables, using logic and deduction to find the solution. But the timer was ticking down, and his mind kept drifting back to Alex. How was he so fast? How could he keep up? Finally, the timer beeped, and both Elon and Alex looked at each other, waiting for the results. The answer flashed across the screen. Correct. The next screen popped up, showing the Fibonacci sequence continuing, as predicted by both contestants. It was clear that they had both solved it. But the comments from the viewers had already begun to pour in. Did Alex just beat Elon? This kid is unreal. Elon's not going down without a fight, but Alex is on fire. Elon laughed, shaking his head. Well, looks like you got that one, but I'll get you next time. Alex smiled, his heart racing. I think we're both learning something here, Elon. I never expected to be on this stage with you. It's not just about winning, it's about growing, right? Elon paused for a moment, then nodded. You're right, Alex. It's about the journey. And if anyone can take on the impossible, it's you. You've already proven that. The realization hit both of them like a wave. This wasn't just a math-off anymore. It was a conversation about what it meant to challenge the impossible, to keep pushing even when the odds seemed insurmountable. It was about growth, about learning, and about respect for the limits and the possibilities of the mind. As the final round loomed on the horizon, the question wasn't just about who would win. It was about what each of them had learned about themselves and each other. The contest had become something bigger. The world was watching two minds at the peak of their powers, but more than that, it was watching the evolution of two people who were no longer just competitors. They were kindred spirits, united in their shared passion for exploration, discovery, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. The final round was upon them, and the tension in the air was almost palpable. The live stream chat was flooded with anticipation. People had watched the math-off unfold, marveling at the back and forth between Elon Musk and Alex Rivera. It was no longer just about numbers and equations. It had become a battle of intellects, a clash of visionaries from two different worlds. One the child prodigy, the other the legendary innovator. Elon Musk leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him, his fingers tapping lightly against each other as he considered what was about to come next. Alex sat a little more forward, his hands on the table, eyes focused and alert. He wasn't just competing with Elon anymore. He was in a contest with himself, pushing the boundaries of his own mind, as if each problem solved was a small victory in his own journey of growth. The final challenge had been set up by Elon himself. It wasn't going to be a simple equation, a series of Fibonacci numbers, or even a complex prime number theory problem. No, this was something more profound, a test of creativity and thinking outside the box. It was a problem that required them to see the world in a completely different way. The screen flashed, and the problem appeared. Create an entirely new mathematical concept or theorem that could have applications in space travel, artificial intelligence, or energy sustainability. The room went silent as both competitors absorbed the gravity of the challenge. For a moment, the tension between them seemed to disappear. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. This was about innovation. The very thing that Elon Musk had spent his life chasing and that Alex had only just begun to comprehend. Elon Musk, a man who had spent his career reimagining everything from electric cars to interplanetary travel, leaned forward and began to form a plan in his mind. His brain was working at full speed, connecting dots between the most advanced concepts in physics, energy, and mathematics. He was thinking about the future of humanity. How could they create new systems, new technologies that would advance space exploration or revolutionize the energy grid? The possibilities were endless, but which one would be groundbreaking? It wasn't just about mathematics in the traditional sense anymore. This was about understanding the patterns of the universe, about bending the rules and pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible. And that required vision. His mind raced through the various possibilities. What if they could develop a new method of computing? Something beyond quantum computers, something that could handle the mind-boggling complexity of space missions or artificial intelligence. What if they could harness the power of dark energy or find a way to stabilize wormholes for intergalactic travel? But the more Elon thought, the more he realized that innovation didn't always have to come from something completely new. It could also come from reimagining existing concepts in ways no one else had thought of before. Alex Rivera, on the other hand, approached the challenge from a completely different angle. His mind was still racing from the previous rounds. He had always been fascinated by the concept of energy, the way energy moved, transformed, and interacted with matter. What if he could create a theorem that explained how energy could be harnessed more efficiently for the future? He closed his eyes for a moment, blocking out everything around him. The problem wasn't about finding a single solution. It was about creating a framework, a new way of thinking. Alex knew that he had to think big, just like Elon did. But he also had to think in a way that connected all his previous learning. Suddenly, an idea clicked in his mind. A new way of conceptualizing the way energy could be transmitted across space, without the loss that normally occurred over vast distances. It wasn't just a new formula, it was a shift in perspective. He felt a surge of excitement as he began to sketch out his ideas, mentally outlining the steps for a theorem that could have profound implications for everything from space travel to sustainable energy here on Earth. The clock began to tick down. Elon and Alex sat in their respective spaces, scribbling calculations on paper, typing feverishly into their computers, formulating hypotheses. The final round was no longer just a mental exercise. It was a race to conceptualize something truly revolutionary. Elon Musk was the first to speak. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts before beginning. His voice, when it came, was calm, but there was a certain intensity to it. All right, so what I'm proposing is a new model for advanced computational systems. We've heard of quantum computing, but what if we could combine that with neural networks in a way that exponentially increases computational power? Imagine a system that doesn't just process information. It thinks about the information it processes, creating its own logical connections as it goes. This kind of system could enable breakthroughs in AI, propulsion technology, and even energy management. The key lies in how we can integrate biology with technology at the most fundamental level, creating a hybrid system that learns, adapts, and grows beyond what we can program it to do. Elon paused, letting the idea hang in the air for a moment, his eyes fixed on the screen. That's the kind of revolution I'm talking about, a system that doesn't just do the work, but can think in a way that mimics the human brain. And in the context of space travel, this would be a game changer, enabling spacecraft to learn from their surroundings and make real-time decisions that would normally take years of programming. Alex sat silently for a moment, contemplating Elon's idea. There was a certain elegance to it, blending biology with technology in a way that could bring true AI to life. But Alex's mind had already begun to run in a different direction. When his turn came, he didn't hesitate. "Okay, so here's my idea," he said, his voice steady but full of passion. "We know that space travel requires enormous amounts of energy to move vast distances, and as we've seen with current methods, energy loss during transmission is one of the biggest obstacles. My proposal is a theorem about energy transmission in a closed system, one that doesn't lose energy during transmission. It's a model based on new understanding of quantum entanglement, the idea that two particles can be linked, regardless of distance, without losing energy. What if we could apply this concept to energy transmission across space? A network of energy transfer particles could allow spacecraft to move across vast distances without relying on traditional fuel methods. This would radically change how we think about space exploration, and it could even be applied to energy distribution on Earth." For a long moment, there was silence. The live stream chat was still, as the virtual audience tried to digest what had just been presented. Elon leaned back in his chair. "You're saying we could theoretically create a way for energy to travel across space without loss?" "Exactly," Alex said, his voice calm but confident. "And if we can harness this concept, it opens up so many doors. It could change everything we know about how we power our future, whether it's sustainable energy here on Earth or interstellar propulsion." Elon nodded slowly, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's bold. Really bold. I like it. I think you've just outlined something that could have massive implications. You've really pushed the boundaries of what we can imagine." The live stream exploded with excitement. Did Alex just solve energy loss in space travel? Elon and Alex are both geniuses. This is bigger than any of us realized. But the truth was, the competition had come to a deeper conclusion than anyone could have predicted. Elon Musk had been proven wrong, but it didn't feel like a loss. Instead, it was a validation of what he had been advocating for all along. The future belongs to the ones who are willing to think outside the box, to the ones who dare to imagine the impossible. And the question remains, who truly won the final round? Was it Alex's groundbreaking energy theory, or Elon's innovative hybrid neural network idea? Perhaps the greatest victory was something else entirely. The realization that the boundaries of what's possible are meant to be pushed, and that age and experience are no match for imagination and drive. What do you think? Who do you think won the final round? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, the math-off might be over, but the future is just beginning. The live stream had ended, and the comments continued to flood in, but for both Elon Musk and Alex Rivera, the real journey had just begun. The hours of intense mental competition, the back-and-forth exchanges, and the profound breakthroughs had not only challenged each other's intellect but had also sparked a transformation neither of them could ignore. Alex sat back in his chair, his fingers still slightly trembling from the adrenaline. It wasn't just the idea he'd presented that thrilled him. It was the sense of possibility. He had never imagined he'd be in this position, sharing his ideas with one of the greatest minds of his time. But here he was, and the world was watching. The recognition he had received, from Elon Musk himself, filled him with a sense of validation and purpose. Alex had never been the kind of kid to seek out praise, but being acknowledged by Elon in this way felt like a dream come true. He turned off his computer, leaned back in his chair, and let the weight of the moment sink in. Everything had changed, not just for him, but for the people who had watched the event unfold. The live audience had witnessed the growth of a young prodigy and perhaps, for the first time, understood just how far a combination of passion and determination could take you. But for Alex, The real victory wasn't in the outcome of the competition. It was in the lessons he had learned, the ideas he had explored, and the way his own mind had expanded. He had reached a new level, one that he knew would carry him forward into the future. Elon Musk was in a similar state of contemplation. He had spent his career focused on changing the world, one massive project at a time. Whether it was space exploration with SpaceX, revolutionizing electric vehicles with Tesla, or even exploring the potential of brain-machine interfaces with Neuralink. But today, something had shifted. It wasn't just the competition that had made an impact. It was the realization that the young prodigy before him had brought a new kind of energy into the equation. Alex had made him see things differently, challenged his assumptions about what was possible. Elon had always believed in the power of technology to solve humanity's greatest problems, but Alex had shown him a glimpse of a future where the lines between technology, math, and human creativity blurred in ways he hadn't anticipated. And it wasn't just about achieving the impossible. It was about creating something new, something that had never been imagined before. Elon took a deep breath and stared out of his office window, the vastness of the world outside seeming to echo the limitless possibilities that lay ahead. He had always believed that the future was driven by those willing to take risks, to tackle challenges that seemed insurmountable. And now, he understood even more deeply that the future belonged not just to the innovators but to the dreamers, the ones who dared to envision a world that didn't yet exist. He opened his phone and typed a short message to Alex. "You've inspired me today. Let's see where these ideas take us." A few minutes later, Alex's phone buzzed with the notification. He smiled as he read the message. It wasn't just a compliment. It was an invitation to continue what they had started. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. The world had taken notice. News outlets, tech blogs, and even mainstream media had all covered the event, with people marveling at the extraordinary collaboration between Elon Musk and Alex Rivera. The hashtag Musk versus Rivera trended for days. But amidst the excitement, a deeper reflection began to surface. What had this competition truly revealed about the nature of progress and the people who drive it? For many, it was a story of generational unity. How the old guard, represented by Elon Musk, could still learn from the young. Alex's vision wasn't just about solving problems. It was about challenging the very way people thought about problem-solving itself. He wasn't limited by conventional thinking, and in that way, he had brought something entirely new to the table. But the real takeaway, the message that resonated most with the viewers, was that growth doesn't stop. Whether you're a 50-year-old entrepreneur or a 16-year-old prodigy, the key to success is the ability to keep learning, to keep evolving. Elon and Alex had each pushed the other to go beyond their own limits, and it was clear that the two of them, despite their different ages and experiences, had a shared passion for pushing the boundaries of what's possible. The world watched, and many wondered, what would happen next? Would Alex continue his rise as a thought leader, revolutionizing math and energy? Would Elon, inspired by Alex's youthful energy, push forward with even more ambitious projects? Days after the event, the ripples of the competition were still being felt. Alex found himself receiving messages from professors, tech enthusiasts, and even engineers working on space projects, all eager to discuss his ideas. He had gone from a young prodigy to someone whose thoughts and theories were now considered on par with some of the world's most established minds. But amid the new opportunities and attention, Alex remained grounded. He knew that he still had much to learn. He was still the same kid who sat alone in his room, pondering complex equations and mathematical concepts. The only difference now was that the world was listening. Meanwhile, Elon Musk found himself rethinking some of his own projects. As much as he had been a mentor and a guide to countless innovators, today he realized that he could learn just as much from others, especially from those who were unafraid to challenge the status quo. Alex's vision had ignited something in him, a spark that made him think differently about his own ventures. Perhaps the future of energy and space wasn't as clear-cut as he had once thought. Perhaps there were other ways to explore, other ideas to incorporate, other pathways to push forward. In the end, the math-off between Elon Musk and Alex Rivera wasn't just a competition. It was a celebration of intellectual curiosity, a reminder that true innovation comes from collaboration, from learning from each other, and from being willing to step into the unknown. The world had witnessed two incredible minds, each in their own way, shaping the future. And as the dust settled, one thing became clear. The future was not a competition. It was a shared journey, one that would require the wisdom of experience and the boldness of youth, together. So, what do you think? What do you believe the future holds for Elon and Alex? Where do you see these ideas going in the real world? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, the journey has just begun. The world needs people like Alex and Elon, visionaries who will continue to redefine what's possible. As the weeks passed since the historic math-off, the world began to digest the implications of what had transpired. It was no longer just a moment of brilliance from a young prodigy or a veteran innovator. What had unfolded between Elon Musk and Alex Rivera was a catalyst, a signal to the world that the boundaries of technology, science, and human ingenuity were not as fixed as we once thought. For Alex, the aftermath was nothing short of overwhelming. Invitations to speak at tech conferences, offers for internships, and even academic partnerships flooded his inbox. He had become a global sensation almost overnight. But amidst the rising tide of attention, he found himself in the same familiar position, pondering his next move. He sat at his desk, staring at the equations and theories he had sketched out during the math-off. The energy transmission model he had proposed was still taking shape in his mind, each new idea building on the last. He realized that the work he had started needed time. It wasn't something that could be done in a few months or even a year. It was a long-term project, a revolution in energy transmission that could change the way the world powered itself. It was bigger than him. It was bigger than all of them. But then, there was Elon. Elon had reached out to him after the event. Their messages had gone back and forth, a constant stream of ideas and discussions about the future of space travel, energy sustainability, and AI. And one message stood out to Alex, one that had arrived a few days after the competition. Alex, I've been thinking a lot about your idea about energy transmission across vast distances. I think there's something here we need to explore further. If you're open to it, I'd love to have you join us at SpaceX for a more in-depth conversation about how this could integrate with our Mars missions. Let's see where this can go. Alex's heart raced as he reread the message. SpaceX. Elon Musk was asking him to collaborate with his team to bring his ideas into a real-world setting. He had always dreamed of working at the cutting edge of technology, but this was beyond what he had ever imagined. Still, Alex hesitated. He wasn't just a brilliant mind anymore. He was a voice. The responsibility weighed on him. What if the ideas he put forward didn't pan out? What if they failed? He had always been content to work behind the scenes, where the pressure was less intense. But this was different. It wasn't just about math anymore. It was about real-world change, about shaping the future. Taking a deep breath, Alex made his decision. He replied to Elon, "I'm in. Let's talk." Meanwhile, across the country, Elon Musk was gearing up for his own set of challenges. In the wake of the math-off, SpaceX had achieved numerous milestones, successfully landing a series of Falcon rockets, advancing the Starship program, and even launching the first private mission to the moon. But despite all the outward success, Elon knew that the company's most ambitious goal was still ahead: Mars. Mars was the ultimate proving ground for humanity's future, and Elon's vision for SpaceX went far beyond the rockets and technology. It was about ensuring that humanity became a multi-planetary species, about creating the technology and infrastructure to support life on another planet. And for that, they needed energy, a sustainable, reliable, and abundant energy source that could power everything from habitats to rovers to interplanetary spacecraft. Elon's mind often raced toward the future, thinking about how to solve the next challenge, how to break through barriers. But now, he found himself thinking about Alex's energy transmission model more and more. What if this was the breakthrough they needed? What if Alex's ideas could unlock the key to an entirely new way of thinking about space travel and energy consumption? Elon sat in his office at SpaceX, staring out the window at the sprawling campus. He'd seen breakthroughs in his career before, but something told him that Alex's energy model might be the one that changed everything. The sheer boldness of the idea, its potential to change the way they thought about interplanetary travel, left him feeling like they were standing on the precipice of something huge. He sent another message to Alex. "Let's meet in person." I think we have something here, and I want you to meet some of the team. This could be the beginning of something really big. A few days later, Alex flew to California to meet with Elon and the SpaceX team. The journey felt surreal to him, as if he were stepping into the future, a future that he was now an integral part of. When he arrived at SpaceX's headquarters, he was greeted by a team of engineers, scientists, and visionaries, people who were just as committed to changing the world as Elon himself. Alex felt a sense of awe as he toured the facilities, his mind racing with the possibilities. This was where the future was being built, and now he was part of it. Elon met him at the door, a broad smile on his face. "Welcome to SpaceX, Alex. We're excited to have you here." As they walked into the conference room, Alex noticed the energy in the air. There was a palpable sense of urgency, of something big in the works. The team began discussing their current projects, focusing on the challenges of Mars colonization, energy sustainability, and how to overcome the limitations of current space travel. Finally, Elon turned to Alex. "So, tell us more about your energy transmission theory. How do you see this fitting into our current projects?" Alex stood up, his nervousness replaced by the confidence he had felt when presenting his ideas in the competition. He had prepared for this. He explained his energy model, detailing how the concept of quantum entanglement could be applied to energy transmission across vast distances without significant loss. He laid out the math, the theory, and the real-world applications. The team listened intently. As Alex spoke, Elon's eyes never left him. The more Alex explained, the more it became clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't just a theoretical model. It was a potential solution to one of the most critical issues facing future space exploration. After Alex finished his presentation, there was a long silence in the room. Then Elon spoke. "Alex, this is incredible. If we can make this work, if we can take this to the next level, it could change the entire way we think about space travel and energy. We need to move quickly on this." And so, the collaboration between Elon Musk and Alex Rivera began. It wasn't just about numbers and equations anymore. It was about real-world impact. They formed a dedicated team of engineers, scientists, and mathematicians to explore the possibility of turning Alex's energy transmission model into a reality. Alex found himself fully immersed in the world of space exploration. He was working side by side with the brightest minds in the field, developing new technologies that could one day power spacecraft traveling to Mars, power colonies on the Red Planet, and even revolutionize how energy was used here on Earth. Months passed, and the work on Alex's energy transmission theory progressed. They encountered setbacks, technical challenges, unexpected complexities, and moments of doubt. But through it all, Alex remained undeterred. He had already proven to the world that he could think outside the box, that he could come up with ideas that could change the course of history. Now, he was determined to turn those ideas into something tangible. As for Elon, the partnership with Alex had reignited his passion for innovation. The energy transmission theory was just one part of a larger vision. But for both of them, it represented something much more than just a breakthrough. It was proof that the future belonged to those who were unafraid to dream big. The next few months were a whirlwind for Alex and Elon, as their collaboration took off in ways neither of them had initially imagined. What began as a simple mathematical competition had blossomed into a groundbreaking partnership that promised to reshape the future of energy and space exploration. Every day seemed to bring a new challenge and a new discovery. Alex spent countless hours in the SpaceX labs, running simulations, tweaking algorithms, and refining his energy transmission model. The theory he had proposed back in that intense competition was starting to show real promise. But theory and practice, Alex quickly learned, were two very different beasts. It was a late evening when Alex and Elon sat together in the conference room, surrounded by whiteboards filled with equations, graphs, and diagrams. The SpaceX team had been working tirelessly on prototypes for the energy transmission system, but a critical piece of the puzzle was still missing. The problem wasn't the theory. It was how to scale it up to meet the demands of deep space exploration. Alex scribbled a few equations on the board, his hand moving almost instinctively as he tried to identify the missing link. Elon leaned over, studying the equations. "You know, Alex, what you've done here is remarkable," Elon said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "But the practical application of this tech is going to require us to rethink everything. How we generate power, how we store it, How we transfer it. Alex nodded. He understood the challenge. They were trying to create a system that could transmit energy across vast distances without significant loss, while also adapting to the extreme conditions of space. The energy needed to power a Mars colony or interplanetary spacecraft was on a scale far beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. The problem wasn't just about energy transfer, it was about efficiency. If they could master the technology, they would be able to supply power to spacecraft, power stations on Mars, and even transport energy across the solar system. The implications were massive. Weeks passed, and the team worked relentlessly. Alex was at the forefront of the research, but Elon was never far behind. He would often check in on their progress, offering insights and occasionally suggesting radical new ideas. But the real breakthrough came when one of the SpaceX engineers, Maria, came to them with an idea that sparked everything into motion. Maria had been working on a completely different part of the project, focused on quantum computers, when she realized something crucial. If they combined Alex's energy transmission theory with the capabilities of quantum computing, they might be able to overcome the major limitations they had been facing. Elon, Maria said one afternoon, walking into the conference room, I think I've figured out how we can scale this. Quantum computing can help us manage the immense calculations required to transmit energy at such vast distances with virtually no loss. If we can combine your transmission model with quantum algorithms, we'll be able to create an energy system that adapts and optimizes in real time. The room fell silent as Alex and Elon absorbed the significance of Maria's proposal. It was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Alex's energy transmission model, combined with the computational power of quantum algorithms, could potentially revolutionize the way humanity harnesses and uses energy, both on Earth and in space. This could work, Alex said, his voice filled with awe. We could create an adaptive energy grid that learns, that adjusts based on the environment, the distance, and the load. It's a game changer. Elon, ever the optimist, smiled. Let's make it happen. The next several weeks were a blur. Alex and Maria worked side by side, developing the quantum-powered energy system, while Elon brought in experts from every corner of SpaceX to ensure the technology would work in the harshest conditions. They ran test after test, making adjustments, refining the algorithms, and solving problems that arose at every turn. By the end of the month, they had their first successful demonstration, a small-scale prototype that transmitted energy over a distance of 100 kilometers with minimal loss. It was a monumental achievement, and it was only the beginning. The success of the prototype sent shockwaves through SpaceX, and the news soon leaked out to the public. People were stunned. What Alex and Elon had been working on wasn't just theoretical anymore. It was a tangible, viable technology. The media picked up on it quickly, calling it the future of space travel and the breakthrough that could power humanity's journey to Mars. But for Alex and Elon, the real work had only just begun. They knew they had to push further, to scale the technology, refine it, and make it robust enough to handle the vast challenges of interplanetary travel. The prototype was just the first step. One night, after the successful demonstration, Alex and Elon stood outside the SpaceX headquarters, looking up at the stars. You know, Elon said, I've spent my whole life thinking about the future, but seeing this come to life, it's different. It feels real now. Alex smiled. I always thought the future was out there, somewhere, but now I see it's already here, and we're just getting started. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the vastness of the universe and the incredible possibilities that lay ahead. They had just unlocked a door, and behind it was a future filled with untold potential. In the months that followed, SpaceX began expanding its efforts to integrate Alex's energy transmission model with their Mars plans. The energy system was adapted for use in space stations, lunar bases, and eventually, Mars colonies. Prototypes were tested aboard spacecraft, and plans for energy transmission arrays on the Red Planet were drawn up. Elon and Alex continued to push the boundaries of innovation, refining the system to handle the immense demands of long-duration space travel. The quantum-powered energy grid was being designed to be self-sustaining, able to adapt to the unique conditions of each new environment and optimize energy use in real time. Meanwhile, Alex was getting more and more attention from the scientific community. His work was now seen as a critical piece of the puzzle for humanity's future in space, and he found himself at the forefront of a new wave of innovation. He was no longer just the young prodigy who had caught Elon Musk's attention in a math competition. He was a thought leader, a pioneer in his own right. But despite the accolades, Alex remained humble. He knew that the journey wasn't over, that the challenges ahead would be even greater. The real work was still to come. One day, as they were discussing the next phase of their work, Elon looked at Alex and said, "You know, I've had a lot of people tell me to slow down, to take it easy. But when I look at the potential here, when I see what you're doing, I know that we can't wait. The future is now, Alex, and we're going to build it together." Alex nodded, his heart full of determination. "We're not just building a future for us, Elon. We're building it for everyone. For humanity." As the sun set over SpaceX's headquarters, casting long shadows over the campus, Alex realized something profound. This wasn't just about technology. It was about the people, the dreamers, the visionaries, the ones who refused to accept the world as it was. They were the ones who would create the future, and together, they would push humanity further than ever before. As the months passed, the collaboration between Alex and Elon grew even stronger. They were no longer just colleagues. They were partners in a shared mission to push humanity beyond its limits. What had started as a math competition had evolved into a journey that would change the course of history. Every breakthrough they made, every challenge they faced, only fueled their determination to succeed. However, despite their progress, there was still a monumental task ahead. The quantum-powered energy system, while revolutionary, needed to be tested in real-world conditions that only the harsh environment of space could provide. To move forward, they would need to conduct large-scale tests, testing the limits of the energy transmission system under extreme conditions: space travel, planetary colonies, and interplanetary distances. The first phase of this was already underway. SpaceX had begun work on a spacecraft designed to test Alex's energy transmission system in space, specifically targeting Mars. The spacecraft, Endurance, would be launched as part of a mission to transport both supplies and crew to Mars, but the real purpose was to see how Alex's energy system functioned in deep space, where energy demands would be unpredictable and often extreme. The team had gathered in the conference room late one evening, the air thick with anticipation. The walls were lined with monitors displaying data on everything from spacecraft design to energy efficiency projections. Elon, always the visionary, stood at the head of the room, looking at the team. "This is it, folks," Elon said, his voice carrying a weight of seriousness that commanded the room's attention. "Endurance is ready for launch, and we're not just sending a spaceship to Mars. We're sending a proof of concept for humanity's future in space." Alex was sitting at the table, his fingers tapping nervously against his notepad. This was the moment. Everything they'd worked for was coming down to this test. The quantum-powered energy transmission system had passed tests in controlled environments, but space? Space was an entirely different beast. Alex took a deep breath, reminding himself of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about proving his ideas worked, it was about setting the foundation for a new era in space exploration. But there was a part of him, the young prodigy who still carried the weight of the math competition, that couldn't help but feel the pressure. Elon noticed the look on his face. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softening. Alex nodded, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm just thinking about how much is riding on this. If this doesn't work..." Elon cut him off with a smile. "If this doesn't work, we'll figure it out. But we're not going to fail. We're too far along for that." Alex smiled back, though it was more of a reflex than a real sense of comfort. He appreciated Elon's optimism, but the gravity of the situation still loomed large. The launch of Endurance was scheduled for the following week, and the team worked non-stop to ensure everything was perfect. Alex found himself submerged in the technical side of things, working alongside engineers to fine-tune the energy transmission system. They had run simulations for months, refining the algorithms that would allow the energy system to adapt to the unknowns of space. But simulations were one thing. The reality of space travel was something else entirely. Elon, as usual, was an ever-present figure, focused, calm, and determined. His belief in the project was unwavering, and that confidence had a contagious effect on everyone involved. The night before the launch, Alex sat alone in the lab, reviewing the final system checks. The room was quiet, the hum of the machines the only sound. He ran through his calculations one more time, double-checking the energy pathways and the quantum algorithms that had been adapted for space. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, but he couldn't pinpoint what. It was like the final piece of the puzzle was just beyond his grasp. As he sat there, lost in thought, Elon entered the lab, his face lit by the dim light from the monitors. "Hey, Alex, you all right?" Elon asked, leaning against the doorframe. Alex looked up, surprised. "Yeah, just going over everything one last time." Elon walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "I know this is a big deal, but we've been working on this together for months. You've done the impossible already. This is just the next step?" Alex nodded, taking a deep breath. "I just want to make sure it works. For everyone. For humanity." Elon smiled. "It will. You've made sure of that." The following morning, the world was watching. News outlets across the globe were covering the launch of Endurance, the spacecraft that would carry humanity's dreams to Mars. The stakes couldn't have been higher. But for Alex and Elon, it wasn't just about the mission. It was about proving that their energy system could work in the real world. As Endurance launched, the team watched from the control room, eyes glued to the monitors. The spacecraft soared into the sky, breaking through the atmosphere and into the unknown. But as it passed into space, all eyes turned to the energy system. The energy transfer protocols were activated, and for the first time, Alex's quantum-powered energy system was being tested under actual space conditions. The system began to adapt to the fluctuating demands of the spacecraft's power needs. Alex held his breath as the numbers on the screen began to stabilize. The power was flowing smoothly, no disruptions, no significant energy loss. It was working. Days turned into weeks as Endurance journeyed toward Mars. The team back at SpaceX continued to monitor the system, tracking the energy consumption, power efficiency, and overall performance of the quantum energy transmission system. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. But the real test came when Endurance entered Mars orbit. The spacecraft was now operating under the full load of the Martian environment. The energy demands were higher than they had been during the flight, and the system had to adapt to the unique challenges of the Martian atmosphere and gravity. And then, without warning, the unthinkable happened. A sudden power fluctuation caused the energy system to overload. The spacecraft's systems began to flicker, and alarms blared throughout the control room. The team scrambled to assess the situation. Alex and Elon exchanged worried glances. This was the moment that could determine everything. The system had been tested in simulations, but no one had anticipated this particular challenge. Alex quickly dove into the data, his mind racing. He realized that the issue wasn't with the energy transmission itself. It was with the way the system had adjusted to the new Martian environment. The algorithm that controlled the adaptive energy flow hadn't been fully optimized for Mars' unique conditions. "Elon, I think I can fix this," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I just need a few minutes to reprogram the system." Elon looked at him with a mixture of urgency and confidence. "Do it, Alex. You've got this." With quick fingers, Alex accessed the system's interface and began to adjust the quantum algorithms in real time. The adjustments were delicate, requiring precision and an in-depth understanding of the energy transfer system. As he worked, the alarms continued to blare, but Alex blocked out the noise, focusing on the task at hand. After what felt like an eternity, the system stabilized. The power grid returned to normal, and the spacecraft's systems hummed back to life. The energy flow was steady again. The room erupted in cheers. They had done it. Alex slumped back in his chair, exhausted but relieved. He looked at Elon, who was grinning from ear to ear. "You saved the day, Alex," Elon said. "I knew you had it in you." Alex smiled back. "We did it. Together." As the spacecraft entered Mars orbit and began its descent toward the surface, Alex realized something profound. The road ahead was long, but with the right team and the right ideas, anything was possible. The future had just taken its first step on the Red Planet. After the success of the Endurance mission, the world was abuzz with excitement. News outlets hailed the mission as a monumental achievement, marking the first successful demonstration of quantum-powered energy transmission in space. The Endurance spacecraft had made history, not only by reaching Mars but by proving that a quantum energy system could function in the harsh environment of the Red Planet. For Alex, it was a moment of validation, but it was also a moment of reflection. The excitement had barely settled before the team was already back at work. The successful test was only one step in a much larger journey. The stakes were still incredibly high. Mars was just the first stop. The real challenge was creating a sustainable system that could support human life on Mars long-term. Energy needs would only increase as colonies were built, and the power system would need to be scalable, reliable, and, above all, adaptable to the unpredictable conditions of space. Back at SpaceX, the atmosphere was electric. Elon had already set his sights on the next phase of their project, establishing a permanent human presence on Mars. The plan was ambitious. Endurance had successfully made the journey, but now they had to think bigger, much bigger. Elon's vision had always been to make humanity a multiplanetary species, but Alex had never quite grasped the full scope of that vision until now. As they gathered in a new meeting room, this one filled with projections of Mars-based designs and blueprints for the next generation of spacecraft, Elon began outlining the next phase of their plan. "We need to start preparing for the first human crew to land on Mars," Elon said, his voice steady, as usual. "But we can't rely on conventional energy sources for this. We'll need something more. A self-sustaining, adaptable system that can handle everything Mars throws at us." "That's where your work, Alex, comes in." Alex was sitting at the table, his mind still catching up with Elon's rapid pace. "You want to use the energy transmission system on Mars?" "Exactly," Elon responded. "We'll be sending large-scale energy systems to Mars that will not only power the colony, but will also be able to transmit power across the planet. Think of it as a planetary energy network, not just for colonies but for transportation, research stations, and anything else we set up. We can even begin to send energy back to Earth in the future. But first, we need to make sure this can work at scale." Alex paused for a moment. The ambition was incredible, and though he had seen the potential in the quantum energy system, scaling it up to work across an entire planet felt like a monumental leap. How do we make sure it's scalable? The system worked on Endurance, but Mars is different. Different atmospheric conditions, gravity, distance from the sun. Not to mention the power consumption will be exponentially higher, Alex asked, his mind racing. Elon smiled, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "That's why I called you here, Alex. You've proven this system works on a small scale. Now, we need to push the boundaries. We'll need to design and test energy transmission grids, solar farms, and backup systems. And you'll need to help us figure out how we can harness the natural resources on Mars, like the winds and the solar energy. We need to make this planet livable. For the long haul." Alex absorbed the information in silence, his fingers drumming against the table. Mars was indeed a harsh environment, but the possibilities were endless. They were on the brink of something that could change the course of human history. The weight of the task settled on him, but with that weight came an undeniable thrill. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Weeks passed as the team worked around the clock to develop a scalable energy solution for Mars. Alex found himself deep in the research, tweaking the energy transmission system to make it adaptable to Mars conditions. The Martian atmosphere was thin, and solar radiation was far weaker than on Earth. The power grid would need to be able to adjust in real time to the fluctuating levels of sunlight and wind, and the system needed to store energy efficiently to avoid periods of blackouts during the night. It was a daunting challenge, but Alex was determined. The algorithms that had powered Endurance needed to evolve. They needed to be more flexible, more robust, and capable of managing power demands in a way that was sustainable over time. Alex and his team developed a series of new algorithms that could predict and respond to energy surpluses and shortages, adjusting the flow in real time. They also integrated weather prediction models to help anticipate solar and wind activity. The goal was a system that could provide constant, uninterrupted power, no matter the conditions. One morning, as Alex reviewed the latest simulations, he was interrupted by a message on his screen. It was from Elon. "Meet me in the lab," the message read. "I've got something that could change everything." Alex felt a surge of excitement. Elon had always been full of big ideas, but this message felt different. He dropped what he was doing and rushed to the lab. When Alex arrived, Elon was standing in front of a large screen, his hands hovering over the keyboard. The screen displayed a 3D map of Mars, with glowing lines representing various power grids and solar arrays spread across the planet's surface. But there was something else, a new model for a high-capacity energy transmission beam. "Alex, we've been thinking about this all wrong," Elon said, pointing to the map. "We've been focusing on sending power from one central station to various locations, but Mars is vast. We need a way to create localized grids that can work in tandem with each other." Alex looked at the screen, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the new model. "You're suggesting a decentralized power grid? Like a network of smaller, interconnected hubs?" "Exactly," Elon replied. "Each colony, research station, and power farm would have its own localized system, capable of transmitting and receiving energy. And the best part? It'll be self-healing. If one node goes down, the others can compensate. Think of it as an energy ecosystem that works together, no matter what happens." Alex's mind began to race. This was genius. Instead of trying to create one massive energy hub, they could deploy smaller hubs that would support each other. It was scalable, flexible, and incredibly efficient. "I think this could work," Alex said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and awe. "But we'll need to run simulations to see how the energy flows between these hubs, how they adapt to environmental changes. It could be tricky, but this is exactly what Mars needs." Elon grinned. "I knew you'd see it. Let's get to work." The next few weeks were spent in a blur of testing, simulations, and design iterations. The decentralized energy grid model proved promising. As Alex had predicted, the energy flow between the hubs had to be constantly adjusted, but the system showed incredible potential to be adaptive and scalable. The real breakthrough came when they realized they could integrate the energy systems with Mars' natural resources, like wind turbines and solar panels, creating a hybrid system that could maximize efficiency. By the end of the month, the prototype for the Mars energy grid was ready for its first live test. The test took place in one of SpaceX's testing facilities, where they had recreated Martian-like conditions, low gravity, reduced sunlight, and intense solar radiation simulations. The grid was set up with multiple energy hubs, each powered by solar panels and wind turbines. The energy transmission system was connected, and the first round of power flow began. For Alex, it was a tense moment. His algorithms were put to the ultimate test. But as the systems activated and began exchanging energy seamlessly, he felt a rush of triumph. The system was functioning exactly as they had hoped. The decentralized grid was working, efficiently, flexibly, and with incredible precision. Elon watched as the results came in, his face a picture of pride. "This is it, Alex. This is the future of energy." As the team celebrated the successful test, Alex felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had done it. They had created a system that could power Mars. And with that, they had taken a massive step forward in humanity's journey to becoming a multi-planetary species. But for Alex, the journey wasn't over. Mars was just the beginning. There were still countless challenges ahead, and the future was filled with unknowns. But one thing was certain, the future was bright. And together, he and Elon were ready to face it. With the success of the Mars Energy Grid prototype, the world had turned its gaze towards SpaceX and Elon Musk's ambitious Mars colonization plans. The decentralized power grid was not just an achievement for Alex and Elon, but a significant milestone in humanity's quest to become a multi-planetary species. But as much as the team celebrated their triumphs, the road ahead remained steep, and the weight of their responsibility was beginning to settle heavily on their shoulders. Alex sat in the conference room the following morning, poring over the data from the test. His mind raced through the next steps, scaling up the grid for a larger colony, integrating more sustainable resources, and ensuring that it could withstand Mars' unpredictable dust storms and radiation levels. But despite his excitement, there was a nagging feeling at the back of his mind. The energy grid worked, yes, but this was only the beginning. The bigger challenge loomed ahead, making Mars livable for humans for the long term. As the team gathered for their morning briefing, Elon stood at the front, already in full gear for the next phase. His usual optimism filled the room, but Alex could tell there was something deeper in his eyes. A quiet intensity that suggested the magnitude of their task was starting to hit even him. We've made incredible progress, Elon began, his voice steady as he looked out over the team. The Mars energy grid is working, and the initial tests have exceeded expectations. But now we have to think bigger. Much bigger. This grid is just one part of the puzzle. We need a self-sustaining, interconnected colony that can thrive on Mars, one that can support hundreds, thousands of people. And it won't be easy. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed Elon's words. There was no turning back now. The first human mission to Mars was not just a distant dream. It was a very real, imminent reality. And with it came a tremendous responsibility, not just to their team, but to all of humanity. Elon continued, his voice growing more resolute. We're not just talking about survival here. We're talking about building a new home for humanity, a place where people can live, work, and thrive. Everything we do now will set the stage for future generations. So, it's not just about energy anymore. It's about agriculture, water, healthcare, shelter, communication systems, everything. Alex could feel the weight of those words. Mars was not just a scientific frontier anymore. It was a new world, a world where everything they designed, everything they created, would directly impact the lives of people. There would be no second chances. Success was their only option. The next few weeks were spent preparing for the deployment of the first major components of the Mars colony. SpaceX's Mars initiative was in full swing, and the team worked around the clock to get the necessary technologies ready for launch. The energy grid would need to be scaled up significantly, with more hubs and larger power farms. They also needed to ensure that Mars' natural resources, water, soil, and atmosphere, could be harnessed to create a self-sustaining habitat. Alex found himself dividing his time between the energy grid and developing a system to extract water from the Martian soil. Water was, after all, the most crucial resource for a long-term colony, and Mars was a barren, desolate place. The plan was to deploy advanced water extraction units that could pull water from the subsurface ice reserves and then filter and purify it for human consumption. Despite the breakthroughs, Alex often found himself struggling with the enormity of the task. Even with all their resources, there were still so many variables to consider. Mars was unpredictable, its surface hostile and inhospitable. And the more Alex worked, the more questions arose. What if the water extraction system failed? What if the energy grid wasn't scalable enough to handle the growing colony? What if they weren't ready for the first human settlers? One evening, after another long day in the lab, Alex found himself walking across the SpaceX campus, the night air cool and crisp. He needed a break, a moment to clear his mind. As he passed by the spacecraft hangar, his eyes were drawn to the silhouette of a SpaceX rocket, standing tall in the distance, its engines poised for action. He was lost in thought when he heard a familiar voice. "Taking a walk to clear your head?" Alex turned to see Elon approaching, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. There was a thoughtful look on Elon's face. He was always moving forward, always thinking ahead, but tonight he seemed a little more reflective. "Yeah," Alex replied, rubbing his temple. "I'm just thinking. We've made incredible progress, but I can't shake the feeling that we're not ready yet. Mars is still Mars. We're not exactly building on a lush, welcoming planet here." Elon chuckled softly. "No, we're not. But that's the whole point, Alex. No one has ever done this before. We're stepping into the unknown, creating a new world out of nothing. That's terrifying, yeah, but it's also why it's so important. People have dreamed of this for centuries." Alex nodded, looking at the rocket. "I know. I think we're starting to realize how huge this is. This isn't just about technology anymore. It's about people, about families living there, building a new life." Elon's expression softened. "That's exactly it. That's what keeps me going, keeps all of us going. The future of humanity isn't here, on Earth. It's out there, on Mars. And whether it's 10 people or 10,000, it's our responsibility to make sure they have everything they need to succeed. And that's what we're going to do." Alex felt the weight of those words, but in that moment, it wasn't just about the pressure. It was about the opportunity. They were building something that could change everything. Do you ever think about what it'll be like when we finally land those first settlers on Mars? Alex asked, his voice quiet. Elon thought for a moment before responding. I think about it all the time. We'll be there in the history books. But more than that, I think about the people who'll live there. The ones who will take our work and make it their own. The ones who will create a new society, build new families, and make their own dreams a reality. That's the part that excites me the most. The next few months were a blur of activity as the team pushed forward on all fronts. The Mars energy grid was scaled up, with multiple hubs now transmitting power across the planet's surface. The first water extraction units were deployed, and initial results were promising. Mars had more water beneath its surface than anyone had anticipated. The systems were running smoothly, and the foundations for the colony were starting to take shape. But even with all the progress, the reality of what they were about to do still loomed large. Elon and Alex knew that the first crew of humans who would set foot on Mars were already being prepared. And while they had designed systems to support the colony, no amount of preparation could guarantee that things would go smoothly. Mars had its own way of testing the limits of human ingenuity. Elon, ever the optimist, had a plan for everything. But Alex, despite his brilliance, still found himself wrestling with doubt. Were they truly ready? Were they prepared to face the challenges of this new world? The answer was still uncertain. But one thing was clear. They weren't backing down. The moment was fast approaching. It had been months since Elon had first outlined his vision for the Mars colony, and in that time, the SpaceX team had worked tirelessly toward making it a reality. The energy grid was operating at full capacity, the water extraction systems were working better than expected, and a dozen different life support technologies had been tested and refined for the unforgiving Martian environment. But despite all the success, despite all the preparation, there was one thing that hung in the air like an unspoken truth: the unknown. In just a few weeks, the first human mission to Mars would launch. A crew of 4 astronauts, carefully selected from the best and brightest of Earth's space programs, would board the Starship and set off on a journey to the Red Planet. They would be the first to set foot on Mars, and their lives would depend on the systems that Alex, Elon, and the entire SpaceX team had created. But with all the planning, the simulations, and the groundbreaking technology, there was still a part of Alex that wasn't sure they were truly ready. It was a quiet evening at SpaceX headquarters, and Alex found himself standing in front of the massive viewing window in the control room. Outside, the night sky was dotted with stars, but his gaze was fixed on a different place: Mars. It felt so far away, and yet, with every passing day, it felt a little closer, more tangible. The Starship was almost ready. The crew was almost ready. The first human footprints on Mars were almost a reality. Thinking about it? Elon's voice broke through the silence. Alex turned to see Elon, standing beside him, gazing out at the same distant world. It was unusual for Elon to linger like this. He was usually the one pushing forward, moving from one idea to the next. But tonight, he seemed just as reflective as Alex felt. "I'm thinking about everything that could go wrong," Alex admitted. "It's not about whether the energy grid will work, or if the water extraction systems will function. It's about what happens when something unexpected comes up. What happens when Mars doesn't play by the rules." Elon didn't immediately answer, instead turning his eyes toward the stars, his face unreadable. For a long moment, they both stood in silence. Finally, Elon spoke, his voice calm, but with the quiet authority that Alex had come to respect. "The world has always been unpredictable, Alex. The universe is full of chaos. You think about the unknowns, and it can paralyze you. But that's not why we're doing this. We're doing it because humans are explorers. We take on challenges, even when we don't know what will happen. That's the essence of what makes us human." Alex nodded slowly, taking in Elon's words. He was right, of course. There was no way to predict every variable, no way to account for every challenge. But that was why they had prepared. They had created the best possible systems they could, tested them to the limits, and planned for contingencies. They had done everything in their power to make sure that the first settlers on Mars had the best chance for success. Now, all they could do was wait. A few days later, the first official launch of the Starship was taking place. Alex, Elon, and the rest of the SpaceX team were gathered in the command center, watching the live feed of the launch pad. The crew was suited up, ready to board. The spacecraft gleamed under the lights, its massive engines primed for action. And yet, despite all the success, despite all the confidence the team had in their systems, Alex still felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. This wasn't just a launch. This was history. Elon stood beside him, his eyes fixed on the screen, but there was a flicker of something in his expression. Perhaps doubt, perhaps excitement. But beneath it all, there was a steely determination. Alex could see the immense pressure that Elon carried, the vision of Mars that he had worked toward for years finally on the cusp of realization. Everything ready? Alex asked, though he already knew the answer. Elon nodded, his voice calm but with an edge of intensity. We've done everything we can. Now, it's up to them. As the countdown began, Alex's heart rate quickened. The first human mission to Mars, this was it. The culmination of everything they had worked toward, the ultimate test of the technology and of human ambition. The engines roared to life, and the starship lifted off the ground, ascending into the sky with a force that shook the entire room. Alex's eyes never left the screen as the rocket began its journey toward Mars. The mission was a success, at least, for the first few days. The astronauts on board sent back routine updates, checking in with mission control and sending data on their trajectory, system status, and health. As the starship continued its journey, Alex allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The launch had gone flawlessly. The systems were working. But then, 4 days into the mission, disaster struck. It was late at night when the alert came in. Alex was at home, trying to unwind, when his phone buzzed with an urgent notification. A critical error had been detected in the fuel cells of the starship. The system had flagged an issue with the power supply, an anomaly that threatened to interfere with the spacecraft's ability to reach Mars. Alex's heart dropped. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing his laptop, and logged into the mission control system. His mind raced as he scanned the data. The anomaly was real. A small malfunction in one of the power cells had triggered a series of cascading errors. The issue wasn't catastrophic, but it was serious enough to cause a delay. If the issue couldn't be resolved, the spacecraft would have to abort the mission. Alex immediately called Elon. Elon, we have a problem, Alex said as soon as the line connected. The power cells on the starship have malfunctioned. It's not an immediate danger, but it could delay the mission. We need to fix this before it gets worse. Elon's voice was sharp. What's the issue exactly? It's one of the fuel cells. It's generating an abnormal energy signature. It's not causing a total system failure, but if we don't fix it, it'll compromise the ship's fuel efficiency. Mars is too far away to take chances with this. Elon was silent for a moment, clearly absorbing the gravity of the situation. Have we contacted the crew? We're waiting for their confirmation on the repairs, Alex replied. They've been trained for emergencies like this, but this is a new type of issue. We'll need to run diagnostics and recalibrate the system from the ground. Get them on the line, Elon said. We'll work through this. We've come too far to let this derail us now. Hours passed as the team on Earth worked tirelessly with the astronauts aboard the starship to diagnose and fix the issue. It was a tense period. Every minute felt like an eternity as they worked to ensure the safety of the crew and the success of the mission. By the time the astronauts sent the confirmation that the issue had been resolved, Alex let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The repairs had worked. The fuel cells were functioning again, and the spacecraft was back on track. But that night, as Alex stared out at the stars, something had shifted inside him. He realized that there would always be obstacles. There would always be challenges. And no matter how much they prepared, no matter how much they tested, there would always be unknowns. The road to Mars would never be smooth, but that was why they were doing it. To test the limits. To push forward, no matter the cost. Mars was not just a dream anymore. It was a challenge that would test humanity's resolve. But Alex knew one thing for certain. They would meet that challenge together. The starship had been on its way to Mars for nearly 2 weeks now, and the atmosphere back on Earth was a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. The fuel cell malfunction had been fixed, but that moment of crisis had done something to Alex. It had shaken his confidence, just a little. For a man who had built one of the most reliable energy grids in the world and contributed to the most ambitious space project in history, admitting doubt wasn't easy. But the reality of what they were attempting on Mars had become more tangible, more fragile. Back at SpaceX, the team was continuing to refine the systems that would support the Mars colony. The energy grid had been scaled up, the water extraction systems were functioning smoothly, and the habitats were in the final stages of construction. But all of it still felt theoretical. Until that first human foot hit Martian soil, nothing would feel real. And for Alex, nothing felt more important than that moment. In the Mission Control Center, the countdown for Mars arrival was just days away. The astronauts on board were still providing regular updates, reporting on their health and the status of the spacecraft. They were approaching the red planet, but the challenges of space travel were beginning to show. One particular update from Commander Emily Harris caught Alex's attention. She reported that a series of small but unusual magnetic fluctuations had been detected in the Starship's external systems. While the spacecraft had shielded itself from the majority of cosmic radiation, these fluctuations were strange and could have potentially caused interference with the equipment. Alex's mind went into overdrive. Magnetic anomalies were not unusual on Mars, but this was the first time such fluctuations had been detected in the spacecraft. As a result, it could interfere with communications, navigation systems, and even the energy grid once they arrived. The last thing they needed was another malfunction once they hit Martian orbit. He dialed into the mission control team immediately. "We need to run an immediate diagnostic check on the Starship's magnetometer. If these fluctuations are bigger than we anticipate, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." The technicians and engineers on the ground worked quickly, consulting the spacecraft's live data feed. The mission control room was filled with a quiet, determined energy as everyone focused on the task at hand. Hours later, a technician came up to Alex with a report. "The fluctuations are more significant than we expected," she said. "They've been causing small distortions in the communication frequency. We've isolated the issue to a temporary disruption in the starboard solar panels." Alex frowned. It wasn't a major problem, just another complication they'd have to manage. But time was running out. If the Starship couldn't maintain stable communication, it would make the landing process far more difficult. "We can't risk losing contact when they're that close," Alex said firmly. "Contact Elon. We need to consider recalibrating the panels before they enter Mars' gravitational pull." Within minutes, Elon's face appeared on the screen. "What's the problem, Alex?" "The solar panel issue is affecting communications," Alex explained. "If we don't recalibrate before Mars' gravity interferes, we could lose direct line of sight. It's manageable, but the crew needs to act quickly." Elon's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind working behind his calm demeanor. "Do we have the tools on board to make the adjustments?" "They have a set of emergency tools for repairs, but this is going to require precision," Alex replied. "The astronauts will need to manually reset the solar panel's orientation to adjust the magnetic interference." "Then let's get it done. We're not losing them now." "I'll send a detailed protocol to the crew immediately," Elon said, his voice unshaken. The next few hours were filled with tense anticipation. Alex followed the crew's movements closely as they manually adjusted the solar panels, following the protocols SpaceX had provided. As the adjustments were completed, the fluctuations subsided, and the communication system became stable once more. "We've done it," Emily reported over the comms, a note of relief in her voice. "We've got clear signals again. Ready to proceed." Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good work, Emily. We're all counting on you." As the Starship neared Mars, the excitement on Earth reached a fever pitch. News outlets, social media, and public forums buzzed with anticipation. The first human landing on Mars was no longer a distant dream. It was about to become a reality. Alex sat in the command center, eyes glued to the screens, watching the Starship's final descent. The astronauts were preparing for the landing sequence, and the countdown had begun. It was a calculated risk. A landing on Mars was never guaranteed, no matter how much technology had advanced. But they had done everything right. The energy grid was online. The water extraction system was functioning. The habitats were secure. Now, it was time for the first settlers to make history. "Everything's looking good," one of the technicians reported. "We're within the Martian atmosphere." Alex's pulse quickened. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his mind raced. This was it. The culmination of years of hard work, of sacrifice, of technological breakthroughs. He glanced over at Elon, who was standing silently beside him, his gaze unwavering. There was no fanfare, no speech, just the quiet understanding that they were on the brink of something monumental. Suddenly, the room went silent as the first images from Mars appeared on the screen. The camera on the starship captured the Martian surface as it approached the landing zone. The red soil, the distant horizon, the rolling dust storms, all came into view. Alex couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. There was no going back now. Approaching landing site, Emily's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding more focused than ever. "We've got this." Initiating landing protocol. For what felt like an eternity, everyone held their breath. The landing gears deployed, and the ship slowly descended. The starship touched down on Martian soil, sending a cloud of red dust into the air as it settled into place. "We've landed," Emily said, her voice full of awe. "We're on Mars." A cheer broke out in the control room. Alex could hear the faint noise of celebration, but he stayed still, transfixed by the footage on the screen. This was the moment. The first human mission to Mars had succeeded. The starship had landed. Elon was the first to speak, his voice low but filled with pride. "This is it. We've made history." The next hours were filled with preparations for the crew's first steps onto the Martian surface. The air in the control room was thick with excitement, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the real work had just begun. The first human settlers would be living on Mars for years, and every detail of their survival depended on the systems they had worked so hard to perfect. Finally, the moment arrived. Emily Harris, commander of the first human mission to Mars, stepped to the airlock of the starship, her face hidden behind the helmet, but her stance full of confidence. The airlock opened. The hatch to Mars itself was about to be unlocked. "Ready?" Emily's voice came over the comms. "We're with you all the way," Alex replied. The first footstep landed on Mars. The first human foot had finally touched Martian soil, and the moment was nothing short of historic. Cameras from the starship streamed back footage, showing the first astronaut to step onto Mars, Commander Emily Harris, planting her boot on the red dust, her figure silhouetted against the vast, empty landscape. There was no applause, no cheering crowds, just a silence that echoed through the mission control room on Earth. For all the preparation, all the anticipation, nothing had fully prepared Alex for the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a landing. This was humanity's first step onto a new world. Emily stood still for a few seconds, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. "We're here," she said, her voice full of awe and emotion. "We've made it." Alex wiped his hand across his forehead. The sweat wasn't from fear. It was from the raw intensity of the moment. It had been years in the making, and this one footstep had made everything feel real. Back in the control room, the next few hours were consumed with the task of confirming the integrity of all systems. The starship had landed successfully, but the real test was about to begin. The crew needed to establish their first base camp, activate the energy grid, set up communication links, and begin the tedious process of terraforming and building for long-term survival. Elon, who had stood silent during the initial landing, was now a flurry of activity, his mind already thinking ahead. "Alex, what's the status on the habitat systems?" he asked, tapping away at his tablet, analyzing data. "The habitats are stable," Alex replied, double-checking the systems. "Life support is green, but the crew needs to begin environmental conditioning. We can't risk any delays with those biodomes." "Have they started unloading the equipment?" "They're in the process. They've begun setting up the habitat modules outside the starship. It'll take a few hours to get everything connected." Elon nodded, the corners of his mouth twitching into a small smile. "Good. We've got a lot more to do." The initial steps were always the hardest. Mars was a cold, hostile environment. Without the right technologies in place, the crew would not survive for long. They had carefully laid out their entire landing strategy, and now it was time to execute it. Emily's voice crackled through the comms. "We're setting up the energy grid now. The wind turbines should be operational soon, but we need to run a few tests to ensure the batteries can handle the load." Alex nodded at the screens, watching the data stream in. The wind turbines, one of the most innovative aspects of the Mars colony plan, were designed to generate power even during the planet's dust storms. While Mars didn't have a dense atmosphere, its thin air meant that the turbines could still harness some power from even the slightest breezes. But the real challenge was storing that power, especially given Mars' erratic weather patterns. If we don't get that system online within the next 48 hours, we're going to be in trouble, Alex said, his voice filled with urgency. The solar panels, while powerful, weren't enough to sustain long-term energy needs without the wind power backup. They needed the turbines up and running, fast. I'm on it, Elon said, already speaking with his team to relay the information. We can't afford delays now. Hours later, the energy grid was functional, and the first few solar panels had been deployed, catching the weak sunlight that filtered through the Martian atmosphere. The wind turbines were up and running, their blades slowly spinning in the weak Martian wind, generating enough power to start feeding into the habitat systems. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time since the landing, Alex allowed himself to relax, just a little. Grid stable, Emily reported. Power's up to 15% capacity. That's progress, Alex said, allowing himself a small sigh of relief. Keep it steady. You're doing great. Elon's face appeared on the screen again, his gaze intense as always. What's the status on the water extraction unit? Fully operational. The first batch of water will be ready to be filtered soon. That's another critical system up and running. Elon didn't smile, but his approval was evident. Good work, Alex. We're making history here. Let's keep it going. The next few days brought new challenges. Even with the successful installation of the initial systems, Mars continued to test the crew's limits. The dust storms, which were a staple of the Martian climate, picked up in intensity. At times, they were so violent that visibility was reduced to just a few meters. But the habitat modules, with their airlocks and internal filtration systems, had been designed for these conditions. Despite the chaos outside, the crew remained safe, operating with a disciplined calmness. Then came the next hurdle. A routine check of the energy grid revealed an anomaly. One of the solar panels was underperforming. It was generating only 60% of the expected power. We need that panel online, or we'll be running on backup, Emily warned over the comms. Alex's brow furrowed. The solar array had been carefully placed to maximize energy absorption, but Mars was proving more unpredictable than anticipated. The red dust kicked up by the storms was a concern. If it accumulated on the panels, it could block the sunlight, diminishing efficiency. Get the crew to start cleaning the panels manually, Alex ordered. They need to wipe them down and clear any dust buildup. Days turned into a blur of problem-solving. From adjusting the energy systems to maintaining life support, it was an exhausting race against time. Every successful test of a system was quickly overshadowed by the next challenge. But the crew on the ground, led by Emily Harris, had learned to push through the exhaustion. They had come to Mars not just to survive, but to thrive. But not everything was going according to plan. One morning, as Alex was reviewing the latest data, a red flag popped up in the system. A significant drop in oxygen levels in one of the biodomes. Check the air scrubbers in Dome A, Alex instructed immediately. They should be recalibrated after the last cycle. As the team worked to investigate the issue, it became clear that one of the scrubbers had malfunctioned, causing a slow leak in the oxygen levels. While the system could maintain life support for a short time, the leak needed to be fixed before the oxygen dropped below safe levels. Get the crew to work on this now, Alex said, his voice now full of urgency. The thought of running out of oxygen on Mars, where resources were finite and every second counted, was a chilling one. After several tense hours, the crew in Dome A was able to seal the leak and restore oxygen levels. But Alex knew this was just the beginning. Each problem they solved only revealed a new one on the horizon. Mars was relentless. As the days passed, the crew's endurance began to show. The constant stress, the unpredictability of the Martian environment, and the weight of their mission were beginning to take a toll. Yet they pressed on, their resolve unwavering. But even the toughest human spirit has limits. One evening, as Alex was scanning through the crew's latest reports, a distress signal came through. It was from Emily. She sounded different, tired, maybe even a little shaken. Alex, we've hit a snag. The habitat modules, they're showing some minor structural instability. We're going to have to reinforce them before we can expand the base any further. Alex's stomach tightened. Reinforcing the habitats was no small task. It would require additional equipment, and there was no telling how long the repairs would take. Understood. Keep me updated on progress. Let's fix this before it gets worse. As he looked up at the monitors, Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. Mars had tested their systems, their technology, and their resolve. But now, it was testing their very will to survive. The question no longer was if they could survive on Mars, but rather, how long could they continue to adapt to the endless surprises this unforgiving world had in store? The first few weeks on Mars had been a whirlwind of triumphs and setbacks. The crew had managed to get the energy grid online, set up their habitat modules, and stabilize the oxygen levels. But despite all their success, the challenges of living on Mars were becoming increasingly apparent. Each day brought a new struggle, and the weight of those struggles was beginning to take its toll on the crew. The first real test of their endurance came one night when the weather system on Mars hit full force. A massive dust storm, one of the worst they had seen yet, engulfed the base, cutting visibility down to near zero. The wind howled outside the biodomes, rattling the reinforced walls as dust pelted the exterior. Inside the habitat, however, the crew remained calm, relying on the atmosphere inside to shield them from the violent conditions outside. They had expected dust storms on Mars, of course, but this one was stronger than anticipated. The dust began to accumulate on the solar panels and turbines, lowering their efficiency significantly. "Emily, we've got a serious problem," Alex said over the comms, his voice tight with concern. "The turbines are barely producing any power, and the panels are getting clogged. We need to clean them before they lose full functionality." Emily's voice crackled back, steady despite the tension in the air. "We're on it. Everyone's grabbing tools and heading out to clean the panels. We'll get it under control." Alex nodded, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. The crew was strong, resilient, but Mars had a way of humbling even the most prepared explorers. As the storm raged on outside, Alex sat in the mission control room, surrounded by monitors displaying the crew's progress. The wind outside continued to batter the base, but the systems inside were holding up. His eyes were fixed on the status updates from the solar panel system, which was still struggling to maintain power. "It's not enough," he muttered to himself. "We're running out of time. If we don't get those panels working properly, we won't be able to sustain the life support systems long-term." The problem was compounded by the fact that the dust storm wasn't letting up anytime soon. According to the latest data, it could last for several more days, leaving the crew vulnerable to power shortages. Back on the surface, Emily and the team had been working tirelessly to clean the panels. They had donned their heavy-duty spacesuits and braved the harsh Martian winds. Their visibility was almost zero, and the dust clung to their suits like a second skin. But they pushed on, each member of the team working in sync to clear the panels of the red dust that threatened their survival. "How much longer?" Emily asked, her voice muffled through the comms. Her breath was heavy, her movements slower than usual due to the weight of her suit. "We're almost done, Commander," one of the engineers replied. "But the dust is thick. It's going to take time before we see any real improvement. Keep going. Every minute counts," Emily urged, her tone resolute. But just as they were finishing the cleaning process, a new problem emerged. The storm's ferocity had caused a partial collapse of one of the smaller habitat structures, one that had been used to store emergency supplies. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it was serious enough to compromise the structural integrity of the module. If the storm intensified, the damage could worsen, and they would lose crucial resources. "We need to make repairs now," Emily ordered. "Everyone, get back inside. We've got a breach in the storage module. We need to fix it before the storm does more damage." Back at the command center, Alex's mind raced. The storm, the energy shortage, the habitat breach. It felt like everything was unraveling at once. But he had trained for moments like this. Space missions, especially those to Mars, were fraught with unforeseen challenges. It was in these moments that the true character of the team would shine through. "Elon," Alex said, turning toward the screen, "the storm is wrecking the habitat storage module, and we're running low on power. The turbines and solar panels are still down." Elon's face appeared on the screen, his expression unreadable. He had never been one for panic. "I'm on it." We've got spare parts on the Starship. Get the team to start emergency repairs. As for the power situation, we'll need to make a backup plan. We might have to rely on the emergency fuel cells if the storm keeps up. Alex nodded. Understood. I'll relay the message to Emily. As the storm intensified, the crew worked furiously to repair the storage module. They patched the breach in the outer walls, reinforced the structure, and began moving the most essential supplies into more secure areas. The storm raged on outside, the sound of the wind howling like a beast that could not be tamed. But inside the biodomes, there was a sense of calm focus. Emily, her face covered in dust, surveyed the damage as the final pieces of the storage module were secured. "This is going to be a long night," she said, her voice weary but determined. "But we've got this. We can handle it." Back at Mission Control, Alex continued to monitor the systems. The energy grid was still underperforming, and the storm had slowed down the crew's progress. The next few hours would be critical. He needed to ensure that the emergency fuel cells were ready for use, and that the crew could continue to operate without power shortages. Just as he was finalizing the backup plan, an alarm blared across the control room. "Alex, we've got a new problem," one of the technicians said, pointing at the monitor. "There's been a spike in atmospheric pressure. It's not enough to cause an emergency, but it could be a precursor to something bigger. We need to keep an eye on it." Alex's pulse quickened. The Martian atmosphere was already thin, and fluctuations in pressure could cause serious complications with the habitat's internal systems. If the pressure spike continued, it could result in a catastrophic failure of the life support systems. "Alert the crew," Alex said quickly. "Tell them to be ready for emergency adjustments. We might need to modify the pressure levels manually if this gets worse." As the minutes ticked by, the pressure spike continued to climb. It was only a slight increase for now, but it was a sign of the unpredictable nature of Mars' environment. Alex kept a close eye on the data, ready to intervene if necessary. Inside the habitat, Emily and the team were on high alert. They had just finished securing the storage module when the alert came through. A pressure fluctuation in the environment. "Everyone, check the life support systems," Emily ordered. "We can't afford any mistakes. If the pressure continues to rise, we'll need to adjust the internal atmosphere manually. Make sure all systems are stable." The team worked quickly, checking the pressure gauges, inspecting the oxygen scrubbers, and ensuring the temperature control systems were functioning correctly. It was a race against time. The environment outside was no longer their biggest threat. Mars itself was beginning to show its true colors. Hours passed, and the pressure spike slowly began to subside, but the storm raged on. The energy grid remained unstable, the habitat repairs were ongoing, and Mars was throwing everything it had at them. But despite the mounting pressure, despite the overwhelming odds, the crew refused to give up. "We're going to make it," Emily said, her voice tired but unwavering. "We've faced worse before, and we'll face worse again. But we're not backing down." As the storm finally began to weaken, Alex allowed himself a moment of relief. The crew had managed to weather the worst of the storm, and the emergency fuel cells were holding steady. The energy grid was still unreliable, but they were alive. Mars had tested them, but they had passed. For now, they had survived. What do you think will happen next? Can the crew maintain their resolve as more challenges come their way? Will the systems hold up, or will Mars force them to adapt even further? Let us know your thoughts below. The next stage of the mission is just beginning, and Mars is far from finished with its trials. The storm had passed, but the damage it had wrought was far from gone. Despite the crew's tireless work, Mars continued to challenge their every move. The dust storms had subsided, but their effects lingered like the scars of a battle. Solar panels that couldn't fully recharge, energy grids that sputtered at the edge of collapse, and an ever-present threat of further environmental fluctuations. It had only been weeks since the first step onto Mars, but it already felt like a lifetime. Alex stood before the array of screens, his eyes tracing each piece of data. The solar panels were still underperforming, the wind turbines had barely managed to generate enough power, and there was still a backlog of essential supplies that hadn't been fully unloaded from Starship. The storm had delayed their progress, and now the systems that they'd so carefully designed seemed fragile, teetering on the edge of failure. If one more thing went wrong. "How are we doing with the solar panels?" Alex asked, his voice strained as he turned toward Emily, who was standing just behind him, reviewing the latest reports. "We're down to 30% efficiency," she said, rubbing her eyes. "And that's on a good day. Mars isn't giving us much. The turbines are still underperforming, too. It's going to be close." "We can't afford to be this close," Alex muttered. "If we don't get the energy levels back up, we're going to lose the entire mission. Life support will start failing, and the habitats could collapse." "We're working on it," Emily said with conviction. "But I think we need to rework our strategy. We may need to rely on the emergency fuel cells more than we anticipated. They're designed to last a while, but if this continues, we won't make it," Alex finished for her. As the days went on, Alex began to feel the weight of their isolation. The crew was performing repairs and recalibrating systems around the clock, but the toll was starting to show. Every hour felt like a race against time, and each failure, no matter how small, piled on top of the last. Morale was slipping. "How's the team holding up?" Alex asked Emily one evening after another long day of work. "They're tired," Emily replied, her tone a mix of frustration and resolve. "Some are getting sick from the dust, and the lack of sleep is starting to catch up with everyone. But they're tough. They're pushing through." Alex ran his hands over his face. It was hard not to feel the mounting pressure. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Emily met his gaze, a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding, maybe even a little fear. "We have to keep pushing. We're the first ones here, Alex. If we give up, what does that say about the rest of humanity's future in space?" He nodded, trying to bury the doubt that was creeping into his thoughts. "We can't give up." Meanwhile, Elon Musk had been relentlessly focused on improving the mission's prospects. From his base in SpaceX's headquarters on Earth, he was in constant communication with the team, offering both solutions and encouragement. But even he couldn't hide the stress that had been weighing on him since the mission began. "Alex," Elon said over the comms one evening, "I've been reviewing the reports. I think we need to make some serious changes to our power strategy. Have you considered using the fuel cells as a more consistent backup power source?" Alex had been mulling that idea over himself, but hearing it from Elon made it feel more real. "It's risky. The fuel cells were never intended to run continuously. We might be able to get a few days out of them, but beyond that, we could run into critical failures." Elon's voice was firm. "Sometimes, you have to take risks to survive. You've done more than I ever expected. But now, the real challenge begins. This isn't just about survival. It's about laying the foundation for the future of humanity. You're not just building a colony, you're proving we can live on another planet." "Right," Alex said, feeling the weight of Elon's words. The future of humanity on Mars didn't rest on their success. It rested on the success of this first mission. If they couldn't make it work, the next missions would likely be delayed or canceled. The stakes had never been higher. Back at the base, Emily and the team had already begun to adapt. They made plans to install temporary shelters and power sources in strategic locations to reduce strain on the primary habitat. As the crew worked to maximize their power usage, Emily's thoughts turned to the deeper problem, the psychological toll the isolation was taking. Mars wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a mental one. "We can't let this turn into a mental battle," Emily told Alex one evening as they were reviewing the crew's progress. "The stress is starting to show. People are snapping at each other. It's hard to stay motivated when you feel like you're running in place." Alex looked at her. "I know. We all need a break. But that's not possible right now, is it?" "No," Emily sighed. "But we need to figure something out. Mars is lonely. It's quiet. And after all the excitement of the landing, we're all realizing how hard it is to live here." Alex nodded, knowing there was nothing he could do. The mission was about survival now, not exploration. Yet, in the back of his mind, a part of him wondered, could they keep pushing forward? Would it take just one more failure to break them? The energy crisis deepened over the following days. The fuel cells were now running at full capacity, but there was a constant drain on the system. The solar panels were working at a fraction of their potential, and the wind turbines weren't generating nearly enough to pick up the slack. Each night, Alex's eyes grew heavier as the data kept pouring in. Critical thresholds were being crossed, and he had no clear solution. Then, a breakthrough. or so it seemed. "We've been analyzing the Martian wind currents," said one of the engineers, her voice laced with excitement. "We've developed a system that could potentially generate a little more power from the turbines by changing their blade angle. If we get this right, we could see a significant boost." Alex's heart skipped. How much more power are we talking about? At least 10%, maybe 15, depending on the storm conditions. Alex nodded. It wasn't enough to solve their problems, but it was a step in the right direction. If they could make this work, it could buy them some time. Time they desperately needed. That night, Emily led the team in adjusting the turbines, carefully recalibrating the blades to capture as much wind energy as possible. The atmosphere on Mars was thin, and the wind wasn't as consistent as Earth's, but they designed the turbines to handle variability. After several tense hours, they managed to get the system online. The results weren't immediate, but slowly, the numbers began to improve. "Energy output is increasing," Emily reported, a smile breaking across her face despite the exhaustion. "It's working. We've got a 10% boost. It's not much, but it's enough to keep the life support systems running." Alex couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. It wasn't a victory, but it was a reprieve. But just as they began to celebrate their small win, another alert flashed across Alex's screen. The oxygen levels in the main habitat module were beginning to fluctuate again. The crew's success with the turbines was short-lived. Within hours, the oxygen scrubbers in the habitat began to malfunction. The dust from the storms had clogged the filters, and the systems could barely keep up with the increasing demands of the team. Another disaster loomed just on the horizon. "Alex, we need to shut down the non-essential systems," Emily said, her voice calm but laced with concern. "We're running out of time. If we don't fix this, we could lose the entire base." The stakes had never been clearer. Time was running out, and every minute was a race. As Alex stared at the screen, he realized the magnitude of what they were facing. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of human life on Mars. Every failure could set back the dream of colonization by years, if not decades. But despite the crushing weight of the task ahead, Alex knew one thing for sure. They couldn't afford to fail. The crew had barely recovered from their previous challenges when the oxygen scrubber failure struck. The signs of a catastrophe were already apparent. The carbon dioxide levels inside the habitat module were climbing, a dangerous trend that threatened the health of the entire crew. It was a race against time, and for the first time since they arrived on Mars, Alex felt that their survival was truly in jeopardy. "Emily, we can't wait much longer," Alex said, his voice laced with urgency as he looked at the rising CO2 levels on his screen. "If we don't fix the scrubbers, we'll have a major crisis on our hands. The crew won't be able to breathe." "I know," Emily replied, her tone even, but the stress was palpable in her eyes. "The filters are clogged with dust, and it's not like we can just run down to the hardware store for replacements. We need to find a way to fix this ourselves and fast." Alex ran a hand over his face, his mind racing for solutions. They had backup scrubbers, but they were nowhere near sufficient to handle the entire habitat's needs. They needed a temporary fix, something to buy them enough time to properly repair the systems. But what? What could they possibly do with the limited resources they had on hand? As Alex stood in the command center, the silence that had fallen over the base was unsettling. The crew was scattered, working on various repairs and monitoring their critical systems. But the knowledge that the oxygen levels were slowly degrading weighed heavily on everyone. They knew how fragile their situation was. Mars had already claimed so much from them. Could they afford to lose more? Back in the habitat, Emily addressed the team, her voice steady but firm. "Listen up, everyone. We've got a serious issue. The oxygen scrubbers are malfunctioning, and the CO2 levels are rising. We have a limited window to fix this before it becomes a health risk." One of the engineers, Ryan, spoke up. "We might be able to jury-rig something using the backup scrubbers and the filtration system we use for the water. If we modify the intake valves, we could direct some of the filtered air into the main system." Emily nodded thoughtfully. It was a risky plan, but they had no other choice. "Do it, but do it fast. We don't have a lot of time." While Ryan and the rest of the team scrambled to make the necessary adjustments, Alex paced in the control room, his mind still racing. Mars had thrown every obstacle at them so far. Storms, energy crises, habitat repairs, and they had managed to survive. But he knew, deep down, that this was different. A failed oxygen system would mean a forced evacuation. And if they couldn't make this work, their hopes of staying on Mars, of proving that humanity could live on this planet, would be crushed. Hours passed. Ryan and his team worked nonstop, pulling apart various components of their life support systems, improvising with the limited resources they had. The air inside the habitat was thick with tension, each passing moment increasing the pressure on them all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ryan's voice came over the comms. "We've got it. The modified filtration system is online. CO2 levels are starting to stabilize." A collective sigh of relief echoed through the base. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was enough to get them through the immediate crisis. The oxygen scrubbers weren't working at full capacity, but the new system was enough to bring the CO2 levels back into a safe range. Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. They had made it through this round, but the reality of their situation was becoming clearer by the minute. They couldn't keep relying on these temporary fixes. They had to get the oxygen system up and running at full capacity, or else they were simply putting off the inevitable. "We're in the clear for now," Alex said, turning to Emily. "But we can't keep playing catch-up. We need a more permanent solution." Emily nodded. "Agreed. But there's more. We've already started to work on the turbine modifications, and there's still the issue of power. If we don't find a way to increase energy generation, we'll run into more problems down the line. The habitat can't survive on emergency fuel cells alone. We need to focus on stabilizing the power grid," Alex said, his thoughts aligning with hers. "The backup systems can't keep us alive for much longer. And if we lose power, everything else will go with it. We need to restore the solar panels and turbines. Can we get them back to full capacity?" "We'll try," Emily said, her eyes determined. "But it's going to take a few more days to get things fully operational." The next few days became a blur of constant activity. The crew worked tirelessly to improve the power grid, modify the turbines, and continue the repairs to the habitat. Their days were long, their sleep sparse, but there was a shared sense of resolve that kept them going. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future. One evening, as Alex sat in the command center, reviewing data from the new modifications to the turbines, his comms buzzed with an incoming message from Elon. "Alex, I've been looking over the data." Elon's voice came through clearly. "It seems like you've made a solid effort in adjusting the turbines and working on the power grid. But I'm concerned about your long-term sustainability. You need to consider an alternate energy source. Have you thought about geothermal power?" Alex leaned forward, intrigued. "Geothermal? That's a significant shift from our current plan. We didn't design the base for that kind of power." "I know," Elon said, "but I've been analyzing the geological data from Mars, and there are some geothermal pockets underneath the surface. They could provide a steady, renewable source of energy. It's risky, but if you can tap into that energy, it could take the pressure off your existing systems." Alex's mind raced as he considered the implications. It was a bold move, a game-changer. The idea of tapping into the planet's natural geothermal energy could solve their power issues in a way that solar and wind never could. But it would require a significant investment in resources, time, and expertise. Could they really pull it off? "I'll look into it," Alex said, his voice thoughtful. "Thanks for the suggestion. We'll need to discuss it with the team." In the coming days, the team gathered for a briefing on the new geothermal strategy. Elon had given them a few initial guidelines, but the crew would have to conduct a full evaluation of the risks and rewards before moving forward. "It's a big gamble," Emily said, her eyes scanning the group. "We'd be drilling into the Martian surface. The risks could be catastrophic. But if it works, it could power everything," Alex finished. "It could mean energy independence. We wouldn't have to rely on the solar panels and turbines nearly as much. It's a long-term solution, but we need to decide if we're ready for it." The crew was divided. Some were enthusiastic, eager to explore this new possibility, while others were cautious, concerned about the dangers of drilling into an alien planet. "We can't afford to be cautious anymore," Emily said firmly. "We've been treading water for too long. We need to take the next step, or Mars will take us." The decision was made. After several days of planning, the team began preparations to drill into the Martian surface. They would start small, testing the waters before committing to a larger-scale operation. If the geothermal pockets were as promising as Elon believed, it could change everything. But if the drilling failed, or worse, caused an unintended catastrophe, the consequences would be dire. As they set up the drilling equipment, Alex looked out at the red horizon of Mars, the barren landscape stretching out before him. He felt a sense of awe. This was it, the moment that could determine whether humanity had a future on this planet or whether Mars would remain an uninhabitable wasteland. We're not just making history, Alex thought, his voice barely a whisper. We're creating a future for all of us. The hum of machinery filled the air as the crew prepared for the most daring venture of their mission, geothermal drilling. Alex stood in front of the drilling rig, the gleaming structure casting long shadows over the barren Martian surface. It was a stark reminder of the gravity of their task. If successful, this could solve their power issues for good. But if they were wrong, if something went wrong beneath the surface, it could spell disaster. The risks of drilling on Mars were enormous, and the consequences of failure were unthinkable. Everyone ready? Alex's voice cracked over the comms, though he'd been trying to suppress the nerves gnawing at him. Emily appeared on the screen, her face set in a determined expression. Ready. We've done everything we can to prepare. The sensors are calibrated. If there's geothermal energy below, we'll find it. Ryan, who was overseeing the technical operations, chimed in next. I've triple-checked everything. The drill's set to go down at a moderate depth for the first pass, no more than 50 meters. If we hit something promising, we can go deeper. But no risks on this first attempt. Good, Alex said, though he wasn't sure anyone could hear the certainty in his voice. Let's make history, team. As the drill began its first penetration into the Martian crust, the team watched nervously from the operations bay. The machine groaned to life, its massive bits slicing into the hard, rocky surface. Every inch it drilled brought them closer to the unknown, closer to the future they had all dreamed of. But no one could shake the feeling of unease. This is it, Emily said softly, her eyes glued to the data screens. Everything hinges on this moment. The drill sensors transmitted data back to the team in real time. The temperature and pressure readings fluctuated wildly, a common occurrence on Mars, but everything seemed to be holding steady. Depths at 10 meters, Ryan said, his voice tinged with caution. We're still in the topsoil. No readings to suggest geothermal pockets yet. Alex leaned in closer, his pulse quickening. They were in uncharted territory. They had models and projections, but the reality of drilling on Mars was something no one had truly tested before. For all their preparation, there was no guarantee it would work. An hour passed, and the drill had now reached 30 meters. The data seemed to be consistent, nothing out of the ordinary. The crew was starting to feel the weight of the silence. But Alex kept his focus. Continue drilling, he ordered, voice steady despite the tension building in his chest. We're not stopping yet. Ryan acknowledged the order, but it was clear from his tone that they were nearing the point of no return. The data was still normal. Nothing extraordinary. Then, as the drill bit through the Martian soil, a sharp ping echoed through the comms. Wait, what was that? Emily's voice snapped everyone's attention to the monitors. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she analyzed the sudden spike in readings. It's a thermal anomaly, Ryan said, his voice uncertain but filled with a growing sense of excitement. The temperature has spiked 20 degrees. That could be geothermal activity. Alex felt a rush of adrenaline. They had found something. The team scrambled to analyze the readings. A heat signature at 40 meters depth, right where the drill was situated, was far more than they had hoped for. Geothermal energy wasn't just possible, it was likely. Is it enough to tap into? Alex asked. We'll need to go a little deeper to confirm, Ryan replied, his voice thick with anticipation. The pressure readings are within expected limits, but we can't be certain until we're in full contact with the heat pocket. Keep going, Alex said, his decision final. We've come this far. Push through. The drill continued, its bit screeching as it made its descent. Minutes stretched into hours as the crew monitored the data streams, holding their breath with each passing moment. Every warning signal, Every fluctuation in pressure had to be accounted for. They were walking a fine line. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ryan spoke again, his voice filled with a note of awe. We've hit something solid. It's not just a heat pocket, it's a full geothermal reservoir. We've got a direct connection to Mars's internal heat sources. The news sent waves of euphoria through the crew. For the first time in weeks, a real sense of hope began to break through the tension. This was it. This was the breakthrough they needed. Emily stood, her eyes wide. This is incredible. We could power the whole base, maybe even more than just the base. If we can harness this, we won't have to rely on fuel cells or solar panels ever again. Alex allowed himself a rare moment of relief. This could be the future of Mars colonization, if we can control this. But just as the crew began to celebrate, the drill's warning lights flickered on. The pressure readings spiked. What's happening? Alex barked. His heart skipped. Ryan's face turned pale as he rapidly tried to adjust the readings. The temperature's climbing too fast. If we don't regulate it, we could cause a blowout. The geothermal energy they had tapped into was more volatile than they had anticipated. It was a massive discovery, but the heat beneath Mars's surface was far more unstable than they could control. It was a ticking time bomb. We need to pull the drill back, Ryan shouted. Now, if we keep this up, we could breach the pocket and cause an explosion. Panic surged through the crew as Alex fought to stay calm. They had found a potentially infinite source of energy, but they had no way to control it. The drill was too close to the geothermal reservoir, and without proper safety protocols in place, they could risk an uncontrollable release of heat and gas. Pull it up. Now, Alex ordered. Ryan scrambled, but the drill was deep, and the heat was intensifying. They needed to act quickly before it was too late. Minutes felt like hours as the crew watched helplessly. The drill's bit began retracting, inch by inch, but the pressure continued to build. The sensors flashed red, signaling a complete system failure if they didn't stop the drilling process entirely. Alex's mind raced. They had gone too deep. They had pushed too far. The drill finally came to a halt, but the damage was done. The geothermal pocket had been disturbed, and the temperature readings were dangerously high. There was a real risk of an explosion, and the habitat, which depended on their equipment to stay intact, was now on the verge of disaster. We need to seal it off, Emily said, her voice tight. Now, before it gets worse. But it was too late. The pressure in the system surged again, and the drill, now fully disengaged, was powerless to prevent the inevitable. Without warning, a violent tremor shook the base, rattling walls and causing the floor to heave. The temperature spiked to unbearable levels, and alarms screamed throughout the base. Alex looked at Emily, his eyes wide with horror. We've awakened something we can't control. The crew had no choice but to evacuate to the emergency shelters. They had no time to save their equipment, no time to fix the breach. Their only option was to survive long enough to restore stability to the drilling site. As they sealed themselves off in the safety of the emergency shelter, the entire base trembled, and the outside atmosphere raged in response. Mars was fighting back, and the team was right in its path. The emergency shelter shook violently as the tremors from Mars's shifting surface rattled their makeshift refuge. Inside, the crew huddled together, staring at the blinking lights and the persistent alarms that screamed warnings about the unstable geothermal pocket they had unwittingly triggered. They had always known that Mars was a hostile, unpredictable planet, but the reality of it, the raw power they had disturbed, was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Alex stood at the front of the shelter, eyes fixed on the emergency systems monitor. The data streaming across the screen was a blur of red and yellow, warning signs flashing in rapid succession. The heat levels were spiking, and the pressure was building at an alarming rate. Mars was fighting back. How long do we have? Emily's voice was calm, but Alex could hear the fear just beneath the surface. Not long, he replied, voice tight. The system's overwhelmed. If we don't do something, we're going to lose control of the entire site, and we'll lose everything. Power, oxygen, communications, everything. Ryan, his face pale, was bent over the command table, furiously working the controls. The pressure's still climbing. I can't stabilize the geothermal vent from here. I need to get outside and do a manual shut-off. If I don't, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing blows. Alex's stomach dropped. The idea of sending someone outside, into the unrelenting Martian atmosphere, was terrifying. The surface was unpredictable, the winds were strong, and the temperatures could kill in minutes without the proper gear. But if they didn't act fast, they wouldn't have any chance of surviving. "I'll go," Alex said before anyone could object. "Ryan, get the suits ready. I'll lead the way. I know the terrain better than anyone." Emily shook her head, her brow furrowing. "Alex, no. This isn't just a matter of knowing the terrain. You've seen the data. It's too dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Alex replied. He turned to Ryan. "Start prepping the emergency drills and equipment. If we can't contain it, we'll need to collapse the vent manually. You'll need to stay here in case anything happens." Ryan nodded, his hands trembling as he moved to prepare the necessary gear. His usual confidence had evaporated under the pressure of the crisis. It was clear that no one was unaffected by the gravity of their situation. Outside the shelter, the winds howled, and the ground trembled beneath their feet as Alex suited up in his EVA gear. Every part of the suit was designed for extreme temperatures and dust storms, but nothing could truly prepare him for the unknown risks they now faced. He felt the weight of his decision, the weight of responsibility for his crew. They were relying on him, and the stakes had never been higher. "Be careful out there," Emily's voice came through his comms, a final reminder of what was at risk. "I will," Alex replied, though his voice was thick with uncertainty. "I'll get this under control." The air outside the shelter was bone-chilling, and the wind made the thin Martian atmosphere feel even colder. The landscape before him was a vast expanse of red dust and jagged rocks, silent and unmoving under the pale orange sky. It was an eerie reminder of how fragile their presence on this planet truly was. Alex moved quickly toward the drill site, his boots crunching on the powdery surface. Every step felt like it might be his last. Each footfall could trigger another tremor or worse, cause a catastrophic failure in the geothermal pocket. He had no way of knowing what he'd find when he reached the site, but there was no turning back. As he approached the drilling rig, the ground beneath him trembled again, and the roar of shifting tectonic plates filled the air. The air around the geothermal vent was thick with heat and radiation, the once pristine landscape now distorted by the force of the internal heat venting to the surface. He could see the drill, still embedded deep into the ground, vibrating as the geothermal pocket beneath it continued to rage. Sweat beaded on his brow, despite the cold. The heat was unbearable, radiating out from the vent in waves. "Ryan, I'm at the site," Alex reported, trying to steady his breath. "I'm going to try to access the manual shutoff valve." "Stand by." Ryan's voice crackled over the comms, shaky but determined. "Roger that, Alex. The pressure's still climbing. Be fast." Alex reached the base of the drill and located the shutoff valve. It was buried beneath the machinery, and the temperature around him was rising rapidly, making his movements sluggish and painful. He gritted his teeth as he began working on the valve, twisting and turning with all his strength. The heat from the vent was intense, and Alex's hands were shaking from the pressure of the moment. He knew the clock was ticking. The moment he lost control of the valve, the geothermal reservoir could explode, releasing massive amounts of heat and gas into the atmosphere, potentially wiping out the entire base. "Come on," Alex muttered to himself, his fingers numb inside his gloves. The valve wouldn't budge. His heart raced as the pressure on his chest grew heavier. Mars, it seemed, was not only a cold, unfeeling planet. It was now actively fighting him. Just as he was about to give up, his fingers found the right position on the valve. He twisted with all his might, his muscles screaming in protest. A screech of metal echoed through the wind as the valve finally released, and for a moment, Alex thought he had failed. The ground beneath him shook violently, and the air around him seemed to ripple with heat. And then, as if by some miracle, the shaking stopped. The pressure readings from the base began to stabilize. The temperature slowly started to drop. Alex exhaled a long, shaky breath, his body still trembling with adrenaline. The manual shutoff had worked, at least, for now. He quickly activated his comms. "It's done," The vent's been sealed. The pressure's dropping. The relief in Ryan's voice was palpable. You did it, Alex. We're back in control. The heat's stabilizing. Alex allowed himself a small smile as he turned away from the site. His mission had been successful, but the danger wasn't over yet. As Alex made his way back to the shelter, the dust storm that had been threatening began to pick up. The winds howled around him, pulling at his suit, and the visibility dropped drastically. The Martian landscape became a swirling mess of red dust and debris, and Alex had to use all his focus to avoid being disoriented in the storm. It was a battle against the planet and against time. But as Alex approached the shelter and the door finally hissed open, he felt the weight of the moment sink in. He had saved them, for now. Inside, the crew erupted in applause as Alex removed his helmet and walked in, tired but triumphant. They had faced their darkest moment, and they had survived. But as the dust settled and the tension lifted, one thing became clear to Alex. This was only the beginning. Mars had just shown them the true extent of its power, and it would not be the last time. We've won this round, Alex said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet resolve. But this planet is far from giving up. We have to be ready for whatever comes next. It had been a few weeks since the geothermal disaster had been narrowly avoided, but the sense of unease hadn't lifted from Alex or the crew. Despite their triumph in stabilizing the drilling site, the planet's unpredictability weighed heavily on their minds. The base was quieter now, more subdued. Every day spent in cautious anticipation of the next disaster Mars might throw at them. Alex had never imagined that colonizing Mars would be easy, but after the geothermal incident, the crew was beginning to see just how hostile the planet truly was. Even with their advanced technology, they were at the mercy of an environment that seemed to fight back at every turn. The new solar panels they had deployed weeks ago were underperforming, the dust storms continuing to cloud their efforts. And while the geothermal reservoir had been stabilized for now, no one could shake the lingering fear that it was only a matter of time before something else, something far worse, was triggered beneath the surface. Alex stood in the observation deck of the habitat, staring out at the endless expanse of Martian landscape. The wind howled softly against the exterior of the base, but he was accustomed to the constant noise by now. His mind wasn't focused on the wind, however. It was on the looming challenge ahead. The base's power reserves were low again, despite their best efforts to make the geothermal solution work. They needed something more sustainable, something they could rely on without the constant threat of failure hanging over them. Emily approached quietly, her footsteps almost inaudible on the metallic floors. "How are you holding up?" she asked, standing beside him and also gazing out at the alien world beyond. Her voice was softer than usual, perhaps a sign that the toll of their mission was starting to weigh on her as well. "I don't know," Alex replied. "We're constantly running on fumes, it feels like. I'm starting to think that no matter how hard we try, Mars isn't going to let us settle here peacefully." She turned to him, her expression serious. "I don't think Mars cares whether we're here or not. It's just doing what Mars does, being a planet. But we're still here. We've survived this long. We can figure it out." Alex smiled grimly, but it was a smile nonetheless. "You're right. But what happens when Mars throws something at us that we can't handle? What if it's not just a failed geothermal vent or a dust storm, but something bigger?" "Then we'll adapt," Emily said firmly. "We have to." Alex didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out at the barren horizon, wondering just how long that would be possible. The next day, as Alex and Emily reviewed the mission's progress, a sudden, unexpected signal blared through the comm system. It was faint, barely noticeable at first, but unmistakable once the frequency locked in. A pattern, a transmission, but not from Earth. Not from any other space station or colony. The comms crackled again, and a voice, soft, distant, but unmistakably human, came through. "Help, please." Alex froze. Emily's eyes widened, her hand instinctively reaching for the console. The signal was weak, fractured, and the transmission only lasted a few seconds before cutting off. "Did you hear that?" Emily's voice trembled, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I heard it," Alex replied, a mix of excitement and confusion running through his veins. What the hell was that? Back in the control room, the crew worked in overdrive to analyze the transmission. Ryan was at the helm, his fingers dancing over the console as he ran diagnostics. "I've got the coordinates," he said, his voice sharp. "It's coming from an area about 200 kilometers east of the base. We've never picked up a signal from that region before. And the transmission? There's something strange about it." The voice sounded like it was out of breath, like it was coming from an old receiver. "But there's no other human presence on Mars, right?" Emily asked, her voice low. "Not officially," Ryan confirmed, glancing at the others. "But this doesn't make sense. There's nothing near those coordinates, no previous signs of activity. It could be a freak anomaly or some kind of interference, but the signal was human. It was definitely someone asking for help." The room fell into a stunned silence as the weight of what they were hearing sank in. Alex felt his heart beat faster. This was more than just a malfunction or a random transmission. Someone was out there. They had no choice but to investigate. The decision was made quickly, but it wasn't an easy one. Going out to those coordinates meant leaving the safety of their base, where the risk of disaster was ever present. But the message had been clear. Someone was in trouble. "We need to go check it out," Alex said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty swirling in his gut. "We can't ignore this. If someone's out there, we have to help them. We're the only ones who can." The crew quickly began preparations for another trek across the Martian surface. This time, however, it wouldn't just be a routine mission to collect samples or gather data. It was a rescue operation. If there was someone stranded out there, time was their most valuable commodity. Ryan prepared the rover for the journey, making sure the communication systems were running at full capacity. Emily and Alex suited up in their EVA gear, each of them glancing at the other with a mixture of apprehension and determination. This was uncharted territory. As the rover hummed to life and rolled out of the base, the landscape outside was eerily quiet, as though Mars itself was holding its breath, watching them leave the relative safety of the base for the unknown. The journey was slow, the Martian terrain rough and unforgiving. For hours, the only sound inside the rover was the hum of the engine and the occasional static crackle of the comms. The temperature outside hovered around -70 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind picked up the deeper they ventured, kicking up dust and creating a haze that made navigation difficult. Alex glanced at Emily, who was watching the readouts closely. "Do you think it's a trap?" he asked, his voice tinged with unease. Emily looked over at him, her expression unreadable beneath her helmet. "I don't know," she said, her voice steady. "But if it is, we can't afford to leave anyone behind. Not now." They had no way of knowing if the signal had been sent by a human, or if it was someone trying to lure them into a dangerous situation. But the desperation in the transmission, the faint pleading, was enough to compel them forward. After hours of driving, they finally reached the coordinates. The rover came to a halt on the edge of a large canyon-like structure, and the view before them was chilling. The terrain was more barren than anything they had seen before. An area devoid of life, with jagged cliffs and craters stretching out to the horizon. And there, in the distance, something strange caught Alex's eye. A glint of metal, a structure partially buried in the dust. "That's it," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. "That's the source of the signal." As they got closer, the true scale of the wreckage became clear. It was the remains of a long-abandoned structure, a communications outpost, perhaps, or something else entirely. But it had been here. For how long, they couldn't know. "This doesn't look good," Emily said as they approached, her voice tense with suspicion. Suddenly, the comms crackled. "Help, please help." The voice came through again, louder this time. But before they could respond, the ground beneath them rumbled. The rover's systems flashed warnings, and before anyone could react, a violent tremor shook the landscape, and the ground split open, swallowing their rover. The roar of the collapsing ground echoed in Alex's ears as the rover plunged downward, its wheels scrabbling for purchase in the shifting Martian dirt. Everything around him was chaos, the screech of metal, the groaning of the rover's systems, the sharp smell of burning circuits, and the muffled crackle of static in his comms. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Then the world righted itself, and the rover came to a jarring halt, throwing Alex forward in his seat. He gasped for breath, his heart pounding in his chest, as the dust from the collapse began to settle around them. For a few moments, everything was eerily still. "Alex." Emily's voice crackled through the comms, shaky but clear. "Alex, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he replied, his own voice hoarse. He fumbled for the controls, trying to assess the damage. The rover had stopped just short of falling into what looked like a deep chasm. The edges of the ground cracked and uneven, but they were still on solid terrain, for now. "We need to get out of here," Alex said, unclipping his seatbelt and looking over at Emily. She was already starting to unfasten hers, her face pale but determined. "Do you think we've triggered something?" Emily asked, her eyes scanning the surrounding landscape. The ground was still vibrating faintly beneath them, and a low rumble echoed through the air, as though the planet itself was growing restless. "I don't know," Alex replied, reaching for the comms again. "Ryan, you read us?" There was a long pause before Ryan's voice came through, static-laced but audible. "We've got a problem. The rover's completely disabled. Power's out. You guys need to move out now." Alex nodded grimly and turned back to Emily. "Looks like we're on foot." The two of them gathered their emergency supplies, tools, water, and a few basic survival kits, and made their way outside the rover. The storm that had been brewing earlier had intensified, the winds howling fiercely as dust whipped around them. The planet's surface was an unrelenting, hostile expanse, and now, with the rover lost, they had to rely on their own instincts to find their way to safety. But there was something else, a sensation that Alex couldn't shake. The air felt wrong, thick with tension, almost electric, as if the ground beneath them was waiting for something, a latent force that was just out of reach. "Where did the signal come from?" Emily asked, pulling up her map as they trudged through the dust, squinting into the swirling red haze. "About a mile ahead," Alex said, glancing at the readout. "It's coming from that structure. Whatever it is, we need to check it out." They moved carefully, avoiding the edge of the chasm that had nearly claimed the rover, their steps slow but purposeful. The wind was so strong now that it was hard to keep their bearings, and the once familiar terrain now felt foreign, ominous. It was as if the Martian landscape was closing in on them. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached the site. The wreckage of the communication station was even more extensive than they had anticipated. It was a sprawling complex, parts of it buried beneath the shifting sands, while others jutted out like jagged teeth from the Martian surface. A part of Alex wondered how this station had gone unnoticed all this time, how it had been left here to decay in isolation. "Stay alert," Alex murmured to Emily, his voice barely audible over the howling winds. "This doesn't feel right." As they approached the entrance of the facility, a low hum vibrated through the air, sending a chill down Alex's spine. He paused, instinctively reaching out for Emily's arm to stop her. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice tense. She nodded, eyes narrowing. "It's coming from inside." They moved toward the doorway, which had been half collapsed, leaving just enough space for them to squeeze through. The interior was dark, dimly lit by the flickering remnants of what had once been a high-tech monitoring station. The walls were lined with old consoles, their screens blank or cracked, but the hum, the strange, pulsating noise, was unmistakable. Alex moved forward cautiously, leading Emily deeper into the darkened facility. His heart was pounding in his chest. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Suddenly, a voice crackled over their comms. It was a distorted, garbled voice, but the words were clear. "Help, please help." Alex froze. "That's the same voice," Emily whispered, her breath catching. "But it's coming from inside the building." They followed the sound deeper into the complex, navigating through corridors littered with debris. The atmosphere felt heavy, suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on them, the flickering lights casting long, strange shadows that made the whole place feel alive with some dark, unseen presence. Then, just as they turned a corner, they saw it. A single figure, hunched over, crouching in front of a console. It was difficult to make out any details at first, but as they approached, Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was a person, human, But something was horribly wrong. The figure was gaunt, its skin pale and stretched tight over bones, its body shaking. The person turned slowly, revealing eyes that were wide, bloodshot, and completely devoid of recognition. The face was unrecognizable, a haunting mix of fear and madness. "Help, please," the person whispered again, their voice a rasp that seemed to reverberate off the walls. Alex's mind raced. This person, who were they? How had they survived here all this time? And what had happened to them? The figure seemed to sense them coming, and a slow, eerie smile spread across their face. "You shouldn't have come," the person rasped, their voice distorted and hollow. "Mars doesn't welcome outsiders. You'll never leave." Suddenly, the hum in the room grew louder, and Alex's skin crawled with a sudden, inexplicable dread. Something in the air shifted, a presence manifesting that felt almost alive. "Get back," Alex shouted, grabbing Emily's arm and pulling her away from the figure. But as they retreated down the hallway, the structure seemed to come alive around them, the walls groaning, the lights flickering violently. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a blinding flash of light filled the corridor. Everything around them seemed to unravel. The building groaned with the force of some immense pressure building deep within, and then, a deafening explosion. The walls shattered outward, and Alex felt himself being thrown into the air. The world around him spun wildly before everything went black. When Alex regained consciousness, he was lying on the cold Martian surface. His helmet was cracked, and his head throbbed with an unbearable pain. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, disoriented. "Emily!" he shouted, but his voice came out weak, barely a whisper in the wind. He forced himself to sit up, his vision blurry. The wreckage of the communication station was now just a smoldering ruin in the distance. And there, lying in the dust a few feet away, was Emily, motionless. "Emily!" he cried again, scrambling to her side. His hands trembled as he checked for signs of life. She was breathing, but just barely. The blast had knocked her unconscious, and her suit was severely damaged. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around. The structure, whatever it had been, was gone, consumed by the explosion. They were alone, stranded in the middle of a wasteland, with no way of knowing what kind of force they had unleashed by disturbing whatever had been hiding beneath Mars's surface. They had come looking for answers, but all they had found was a deeper mystery, one that was far darker than they could have ever imagined. The team is down to 2 survivors, and Mars has proven itself even more dangerous than they feared. What was that strange presence they encountered in the ruins? And how much more of Mars's deadly secrets will they uncover as they fight to survive? What do you think the future holds for Alex and Emily? Share your theories in the comments below. This story is far from over.